At first it was a skyscraper, then it was an airport, and now John McClane must protect the city of New York. Die Hard with a Vengeance teams Bruce Willis with Samuel L. Jackson and shakes up the formula with a little game of Simon Says. Let's discuss the best Die Hard sequel. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Do you know the 21st president?
Not a clue. This is a movie podcast. We are working through the Die Hard franchise. It's not Christmas anymore. It's
Nope.
New Year's week, presumably, just based on Christmas happening between 2 and 3. So
Yeah, right about.
yeah, welcome everyone. For Die Hard with a Vengeance, the third movie in the Die Hard franchise, one that tends to be well liked. We'll see how we feel as we get into it. But first time watch for David, at least I'm assuming it is based on the others.
I think it was, I can't remember which Die Hard it was, but this was another one of those ones where it came on cable and I never sat and watched the whole thing, but I did recognize a very meaty chunk in the middle.
Okay, all right, so you've seen snippets of it.
Yes.
But yeah, so this is the one with Samuel L. Jackson kind of co-piloting the movie, along with Bruce Willis as John McClane and Jeremy Ironside. No, Jeremy Irons. I'm mixing them up with Michael Ironside. I apologize. Yeah. Jeremy Irons is here to play the villain of Simon. So we'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into the spoilers. If you're enjoying the show, please do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps us out a bunch. And if you want to support the show and get some bonus shows and content, you can do that over at Patreon. But I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So this one, this is fairly well known at this point. It's kind of like really well known trivia that this originally, the script for this was not a Die Hard script. It was just a script called Simon Says that they looked at and said, hey, wouldn't take too much to turn this into a John McClane adventure. And not only that, somehow John McTiernan, the director of the original film, came back to direct this one. So kind of an interesting mix of elements concocted to bring this to the world in 1995. So yeah, we'll get into it. The basic premise of it is that the main terrorist is planting bombs around the city and is, for some reasons, honing in on John McClane and saying that he has to do things and try and solve the various riddles and puzzles that he's setting up. He's kind of like a dilute version of the Riddler to an extent, at least the way he is with John.
Yeah, it's. I was gonna go with like a. It doesn't make much sense. I'm about to say it, but I was gonna think in terms of like a proto Jigsaw sort of thing, where it's like you have to solve the clues and stuff like that. But ultimately, it is a lot closer to Riddler, where it's like, but like this isn't going to like test your fortitude or your ability to inflict harm or whatever. It's literally just solve a child's riddle, and then there you go.
Yes, and the consequences are, quite big, so they feel very super villainy, as opposed to, I'm just going to dismember you and no one else of the Jigsaw variety. So yeah, we'll get into it. David, what did you think of Die Hard with a Vengeance?
I like it. I think it is a very well-made movie. There are aspects to it I definitely do like. I think if I'm just going to get my nitpicks out of the way real quick, I think that by the time it hits the ending, it may do a few too many swerves. I think that it just kind of goes a bit too much in like, oh, you thought this, but actually that, but then actually this, but then actually that. And I'm just, by the end of it, I've kind of lost the connection of what is actually happening in a little bit. But leading up, I would say the entire first hour of this movie was a very solidly written sort of thriller. I like the concepts that it's going with. I think it kind of takes a little fall off for me once we actually get into the villain's plan aspect and like seeing more from Simon's perspective, but it's not a huge fall off. I think I was really right up to it until probably the last like 20 minutes and when it started doing those swerves. But all in all, it's still a very positive experience, and I think it looks great. I think the riddles themselves are very fun, but ultimately not as big a part of the movie as I would have liked it to be.
Yeah, I like Die Hard with a Vengeance quite a bit. I think for most people, this tends to be their second favorite of the franchise. The first one, obviously, being the usual number one pick. Oh, some people obviously are against the grain and will have this as a favorite, or even some people like Die Hard 2 the most. I mean,
I'll personally put 5 somewhere in those top 2 spots, clearly,
yes.
But
very good, yes. But I don't really so much care about the swerves. I've never really even thought about it that way. And I know it's just because I've been watching this since I was a kid, so I don't really think about the turns that it takes plot-wise. But I do think the weakest part of this movie is its finale. The last 10-15 minute set piece is just by far the least interesting because it feels so separate from all the rest of the movie and just a lot more simplistic. Where I think I could have almost have been ready for a speed style. No, there's an entire act here that you weren't expecting with a whole, it's just a little bit anticlimactic in that sense. But it's a lot of fun. It has its own mechanics, its own gimmicks. That's a little bit different from the other movies. It does keep McClane, albeit with a partner this time, but it keeps him somewhat disconnected from the rest of the police force in New York City. So even though it's in an entire city, it still feels very die-hardy in that way. And the other thing that makes it feel very die-hard is that, well, two things. One is that this is events that happen around McClane that he has no power in. He's not expecting them and they just kind of he's thrust into it. And two, the idea that it all effectively takes place in a single period of time, a day or a night. Usually it's a night. In this movie, it's a day.
So. I will say immediately right out the gate, this does go against one of the things you said makes a Die Hard movie, which is to say that John McClane just happens to be the guy in the situation rather than what this movie does where he's called out by name because he's John McClane
that is true. Yeah, that is true. But I will say, and I'm thinking mainly of Die Hard 5 when I say this, it's still something that he doesn't know is coming or is unexpected. In Die Hard 5, he travels to a location to get involved in something because he's got motivations to do so. And that is very much not that. Admittedly, yes, this is not like he's just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He is dragged into it in this one, but still very much unexpected. I think one of the interesting things about this movie is that because we finally see him just be a cop in New York, we get to see who his colleagues are and what they think of him. And that's a big part of the first 15, 20 minutes is.
Honestly, I get it. The fact that he goes around these people, they seem to understand him and are fully willing to play ball with him. I understand why he's so reluctant to leave.
Well, I mean, he ended up back in New York somehow. They never really flesh out exactly how he ended up back. But
I don't want to harp on this point, but that was literally one of my main complaints at the beginning of the last one was I just see him as a New York cop. I don't understand why he switched over to LAPD. To then have him be back at the NYPD with no explanation. I'm like, so what was the point? Why did we make him LAPD in that one movie?
Well, because they didn't know they were going to do this movie when they did that decision.
They should have, damn it. I demand them plan out 10 years all at once.
Look, I will stand by him making the move to LAPD for 2 made complete and total sense based on how the first movie ended. This is the one that's a bit more abrupt and things aren't going well. He's back in New York. But the reason why I say it's not really explained or fleshed out on is that by the sounds of it, the fight that he says he's had with his wife, it sounded like that happened when they were already in different cities, which suggests that there was already a move back in some way before that point, which is a little bit weird. I don't think you better think about it too much. It's not a big deal. I think we couldn't get her back, so we've written around her, right? We still talk about her character. She's still a factor in his life, but we're not going to see her, so we have to just sort of dance around it a little bit.
Yeah, it is also a thing where it is 100% necessary to set this in New York, just based off of aspects of the plot. So it really is. It's not like they could just say oh, no, we'll just adapt it for LA or California, whatever.
Yeah, plus I think, even without, I know what you're talking about when you say specific things, but even just the idea that you've got someone running around a city and that's a big part of what the movie's doing, I feel like New York just works better for that than almost any other city in the US, just because Manhattan's this, very simple, easy to understand plot of land that's in a sort of grid format. And even as someone who has never been to New York, I still understand the idea. We have to get to the other side of Central Park in New York traffic. We have to get to the south side of the island. And I'm like, yes, I understand how far away that is. So
the way I see it is that if you need people to understand how the city works, you choose New York. If you need some interesting sites and like locations, you go to San Francisco. If you just need a generic ass city, you go to Chicago.
What about LA? That's used a lot as well.
I'm gonna lump LA in with the San Francisco, but if you need LA, that's if you're specifically looking for the glamour shots. If you're specifically like, this needs to take place in Hollywood.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think it's smart because we talked a lot in the first Die Hard movie about them making the geography of the building clear as the movie went on. And it's almost a bit of a cheat, but it works in that we're doing a whole city. So you pick a city that people have a vague understanding generally of what the overall geography is.
Right.
You know, all of a sudden, you have like that built in before you even have to explain anything. So you can play with that. And it makes use of that because a big part of the first half of the movie is like getting from one part of the city to the other through various means in certain amounts of time. So they play with that quite a bit early on, especially. It's an interesting movie actually because I'd kind of describe it as having at least a 4-act structure, because I think there's two things at the start you could lump into as one big act, but I don't know if I feel right in doing that. I feel like everything up until, and we're not in spoilers yet, but everything up until he is teamed up with Samuel L. Jackson, right, is kind of Act 1. And then everything from there, when they're together doing stuff, up until we actually get the sort of the main thrust of the rest of the movie, which is kind of when we first see Jeremy Irons and all that, or just before that, that to me feels like the end of another act. And then, so that arguably is the end of Act 1, but I think there's so much in that first chunk that it actually splits into 2 acts quite easily. And then you've got, you know, bulk of the movie, and then your climax.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that so much happens at the end of, or right up to the Jeremy Irons reveal, that it doesn't make sense for it to be its own act, but if you were really sticking to a 3-act structure, it probably would all be collectively in there.
Yeah, but not all movies are, to be fair, and I think this is one that falls into, because you could make an argument for 5, cause I could kind of make a split, because there's kind of a climax to the stuff in the city, and then there's a bit after that at the end, and you could almost, it's not very long, but you could almost say that last 10-15 minutes is almost its own little act or coda, if you want to call it that. But
I mean, I would call that bit the climax, ultimately. I think that the rest of it is not quite, like, I know what we're talking about in terms of where the split would be, but I would call the moment right before that a big set piece, but I wouldn't call it the climax quite yet.
No, I wouldn't say that is the climax, but I'm saying, if like, you could almost argue though it's the end of an act, and then that last part is like the 5th act. Not that any of this matters. It's just something that popped out in my head as I was watching it and thinking, oh, I feel like we've already ended Act 1, but then you don't get to the point where the villains like started what the main like threat of the movie is until like another 20 minutes after that, and it's like, oh, that feels like the start of Act 2 there, but we've already had 2 acts, so you know.
Yeah, it feels like it's kind of trying to do back on the original Die Hard, where obviously you go through so much in the movie thinking, oh, this is a terrorist thing, and then you get that pivot over of, no, it's actually a heist. It feels like it's trying to do that same sort of thing here, where it has you believing a certain thing up to a point, and then it pivots over. It just happens to be like 40 minutes into the movie, whereas the other one was closer to halfway, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to go back and check. I don't remember. But it's but honestly, for the most part, it works though. Like I say, I think the climax is a little lackluster, but everything else, I really enjoy. I think the chemistry between Willis and Samuel L. Jackson is super strong. I think that, like I say, the use of the city and the locations is great. There's a nice variety of things happening. We've got sequences on trains. We've got sequences on boats. We've got maybe the best taxi ride ever captured on film in this. So, you know, we've got a whole variety of different things. And if you really wanted just it to feel like classic Die Hard again, We have a white vest that by the end of the movie is not going
Good
to be
Lord.
remotely white anymore.
That keeps happening where like the movie's playing out and I picture him, he's in a white vest, and then at a certain point in the movie I'm like, that's black. When did he change into a black? No, wait, that's his blood. Right, never mind.
Yes. And if you're paying attention, you can see him gradually getting more dirty as the movie goes on. They put a lot of effort into sort of seeing the stages of this play out as the movie goes. So, no, fun. Interesting thing on the music, actually. So in the first movie, they made Ode to Joy this big thing for the villains, and we talked about how they kind of worked a few notes of it into the score for the villains. What's interesting about this is they kind of do a similar thing again, where I don't even know the name of the song, but it's like a Civil War tune.
I know it as The Answer Marching In. I don't know what the actual
I
name
know
of the
it as
song
a Die Hard
but
3 song. Well, that's what I know it as. But they do a similar thing. But what's interesting is that they work it in, so you get the big bit in the middle where they actually play the track, but they also work in a few notes into the score. But what I thought was very interesting, there's points in this movie a few times where you get a few notes of Ode to Joy in the score, and then it transitions into this song in the score, along with some original bits and pieces, because it's sort of just it's playing with them and doing whatever it wants with it. I thought that was interesting because it was like, hey, we're sort of like tying it back to the idea of the villains in the first movie, but we're also doing their own sort of take on a classical piece of music.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, I think that's probably something that was worked in the, I don't want to say post, like it was done after the script was written, because obviously, starting as Simon Says, it doesn't make any sense that would be a thing, but it does work in pretty well from a directorial point of view of like, oh, okay, yeah, we're bringing back this not classical music, but older public domain music that we can just get away with using.
Yeah.
Also, I did check here, and it's called When Johnny Comes Marching Home from the American Civil War.
Good to know. I only know that's a Civil War song because I was humming it once and someone said, why are you humming a Civil War song? And I'm like, I'm humming Die Hard 3, thank you very much. What are you talking about?
I want to know who called it out as a Civil War song, because I know The Ants Come Marching is literally a children's song. It's literally just like it's a cute little kid's song. So whoever knows it as a Civil War thing has a different history than I do.
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as anything else goes, like I think the action's pretty solid. It's very different to what Die Hard 2 had going on.
Yeah, so that's the thing that I remembered from watching it on cable was the riddles bit. The part where we go through and like he has to solve these little riddles in order to get through it. And I really like that. Like I'm always someone who gets a kick out of being able to be like, oh yeah, here's a thing where you just have to outthink the villain, and they play by fair rules. It's not like it's a trick question or whatever. I like, Riddler stories, basically, as long as it does end up being something clever. I really like that stuff in this, but then ultimately about halfway through the movie, they just stop. It's just like, okay, and we're done with that now. And then it just becomes more standard action fare where they just chase down the guy and have to fight him. But I kind of wanted more of that. I know that it's not what the focus of the back half is, but it was very clear to me the delineation of here's what the Simon Says script was, and then here's where it turned into Die Hard.
I can kind of see what you're saying with that. I don't really mind it going away though, because I actually think there's a clear point where it was supposed to be the end of it in the movie. Like there's a point where John McClane was supposed to die at this point, but obviously the villains didn't get their way, and he's still around.
Right.
So the movie goes on beyond that. I also think that it makes sense they're not super complicated, because John McClane's not supposed to be Batman. He's not supposed to be this super sleuth, like genius character. If anything, he's lucky he picked up a buddy who's better at riddles than him, because Samuel L. Jackson does a lot of the brain power work in this.
And I don't want them to be complicated. Like, I don't want it to be this, solve for the integral of a friggin' formula or something like that. Like, it should just be a simple little riddle. But I don't know. I wanted them to at least have one last one. I wanted something in the climax that calls back to it to say, like, here we go. But instead, it just ended up stopping wholesale about halfway through and never got mentioned back on.
I can't think of what the context would be though for there being one in the climax though, because at that point,
oh yeah, it would require a totally like
yeah,
separate setup. Like you'd have to change everything to get into it. I just wanted there to be like, you know, you were mentioning before with Speed. Like obviously in the climax of Speed, it calls back to the original things that were set up at the beginning of the movie, and that's something that I wanted to happen here. Like we went through this entire thing with Riddles being this big open air, and then it just kind of phased out.
Yeah, I don't think they would have called back to the riddles. If anything, like I could see a better climax calling back to the start of the movie, but I wouldn't call back to riddles. I'd be calling back to the idea, like especially if you're going to flip it and say McClane's doing to the villain what happened to him at the start, is that out of nowhere he's getting a phone call and been told to do something, or you know, like something that sort of flips the script onto the bad guy as to what he was doing at the start. But
Right.
you know, I like again. This is at this point we're just kind of like rewriting it because I think that's the only thing is the ending just kind of feels a little bit anticlimactic, just a little bit really
I'd say
quick
tacked on.
yeah, tacked on, a bit quick and straightforward, and it's just like, well, we just need to end this now, so this is how we're going to quickly do it. When I would have almost like I said, if they just said we're going to pull a Speed, and what I mean by that is that, you know, Speed, once the bus part's over, there's a whole other section, right? And it kind of like bookends the movie with these sort of smaller crises with the big bus one in the middle. And I almost think that when we're in this new location at the end of Die Hard 3, you, like, make it more of a big deal. Like, have it be more than just this quick helicopter thing. Like, actually have more of a, make use of the location, do something, make it kind of like a fun surprise that there's like a mini movie at the end kind of thing.
Yeah, that's also another thing, though, is that it also just abandons the idea of New York is the focal point. It's the Nakatomi Plaza, because we go to a totally separate location that we have never once dealt with in this movie, and that's where we decide to have the finale. So it's a little bit disappointing in that regard as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's plot reasons for it, but it does feel a bit like I think I'd be fine with it if they did what I was just suggesting. If it turned into a little surprise, or there's a mini Die Hard at the end of the movie, but that lasts a good like half hour, I'd have been like, oh yeah, like give me a little surprise here. But because it does feel so quick, it does just feel a bit weird and disjointed with the rest. It is by far the weakest element of the movie, is the last like 15 minutes.
Yeah,
right?
I'd agree with that.
It's by far the part that sticks out. I do like the supporting cast of characters though. I like kind of the, not even the tough captain. He's kind of just like, he's just done with putting up with John's shit. He's a little sympathetic, but you know, he's hard hitting when he needs to be.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I didn't even view, because we've had the captain who's like absolutely not listening to John and just like doing his own thing regardless. This captain comes in and he's like, John, you've been through absolute hell, but like if you say something, I'm gonna check it out. Like he understands that John has good leads.
Yeah, he's a lot more down to earth than the captain we had in the first movie. I mean, that's I mean, you're the LA captain, obviously was what I'm talking about. But yeah, we see his colleagues. We see Joe is one of the characters played by Greene, who typically plays Native American characters in movies that require a role such as that. But here he gets to be a cop.
I can't honestly remember the actor that played him. I think it was Charlie, the bomb technician.
Well,
I can't remember if Charlie was his name, but whoever the bomb technician was, I thought he was just going to be a one scene wonder, but he comes back a couple times in this movie, and I actually really grew to like his character because of how the actor portrayed him. So top marks on that.
Yeah, Kevin Chamberlain played him. Another cop character is Colleen Camp playing Connie, who is actually like known for a few different things. I just watched her in Clue a few weeks ago. I rewatched that movie. She's in that.
Okay.
She's like the hot maid in that movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
Different in this movie, I'll give that.
And she's in Wayne's World. She's like the rich guy's wife in Wayne's World. So she was in a few things like over the course of about a decade.
All right.
But yeah, she's in here. And then you've got the villains, of course. There's a couple of sort of like, obviously you get Jeremy Irons, but there's a couple, as with per usual with these Die Hard movies, there's a couple of others on the team of villains that stick out as being, you know, like the main henchman or the next person down. There's a really sort of evil chick who's like second in command or third in command, and then there's like a sort of evil looking guy who's like, you know, this movie's version of the long-haired dude from the first one.
I was gonna say he's Carl. He's the muscle.
So You've got that. Also, I want to I want to say something here actually. So this movie has multiple things that, like, because of time has moved on 30 years since it came out. Almost.
Oh god, I know exactly what you're
right?
saying. Yeah.
29 years, right? So the first thing I'll say, obviously there's multiple shots of the World Trade Center, which I didn't really think of in and of itself. It's whatever, it's fine. It's a movie set in New York before 9/11, right? But I thought of that sort of as the third thing after two other things and realized, oh my god, how many things in this movie are going to get brought up? And it's completely innocent, but I'm feeling weird about it because of time.
I know exactly which things, yeah.
But there was one that made me burst out laughing because I'd forgotten this line of dialogue. And I think what's so funny about it to me is I don't think I've watched this movie since before 2016.
Yeah.
Right? So my opinion or knowledge of a certain person perhaps wasn't all that, in depth, right?
Are we maybe talking about someone who just a little bit earlier starred in Home Alone 2 by chance?
A few years before this, yes.
Yeah.
Right? And specifically though, like some of the things I've learned about him, we're talking about Trump here for the record, right? When he's not falling off.
That's not obvious.
Right? Is that, he during the Central Park 5 thing, right? Which also, funnily enough, ties into Harlem, which is a big thing that's brought up in the movie as well.
Yeah, this has a lot of race stuff, but continue.
Yeah. And there's a line in the movie where it's the switchboard for the phone operating system, right? Where because of stuff the villains are doing, the regular network that deals with all the 911 calls is going down. And this switchboard now has to take all of the city's 911 calls. And when the main woman who works there, who happens to be black, hears that this is happening, that they have to accept all these calls, she, with an exasperated, sarcastic tone, says, "And I'm going to marry Donald Trump." This line made me burst out laughing because I did not remember it. And it just, it played way better for me here because I just know why that's a funny line, why a black woman saying that is such a silly, she's saying this, no, we can't do that, so here's something equally ridiculous.
Yes.
So it broke me. And then the fact that there's a little joke about Hillary Clinton later on in the movie, there was a little cherry on top. I'm like, oh my god, how many things is this movie going to reference that end up being important in 2016?
Yeah, it's not even like, oh, here's a little joke about Hillary Clinton, because obviously Bill Clinton would have been around. It would have made sense. No, they specifically point out saying, like,
in 1995. He was literally president.
Right, absolutely. But it wasn't even specifically like, oh, Hillary Clinton exists. They specifically say, like, oh yeah, Hillary Clinton, the 43rd president. And it's like, oh, movie. My dear sweet movie.
I was not. I mean, it didn't get as much of a reaction as the Trump line, but taking them together, geez, I was like, oh my. It's like two scenes later, here's a shot of the World Trade Center, just in case you want to be reminded of anything else that's happened in the past 30 years.
Not only that, I mean, obviously this movie has a lot to do with, domestic terrorism. It's people, there's bombs around New York. There's a few sequences in this where a bomb goes off, and then they specifically show people, covered in dust and debris
running away
and stuff like that. And I'm like, ooh, buddy. And then add on top of that, I don't even know.
In fact, actually, I think they referenced the attempted bombing. Remember there was a World Trade Center bombing back in the early 90s, late 80s?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure there's a quick line where someone says, oh, it's worse than the World Trade Center. I think there's a little quick line like that.
Yeah, I missed that one. What I was about to say is that literally a month or two before this movie came out, April of 1995, there was the Oklahoma City bombing, which was a federal building that got bombed. And that was a whole thing during the press junket where Bruce Willis basically sat down with people interviewing him and was like, I will not be talking about that. We are not going we're not going to trivialize that. We're not going to compare it to the movie. We're just not going to talk about that. So yeah, it was a lot going on with this.
Yeah. It's there's a lot of things where the movie does nothing wrong. It doesn't do anything in poor taste. It's just that time has made a few little lines of dialogue or a few little visuals go,
I don't think that one's going to be on the digitized special edition.
What's funny is it used to be cut in the UK to get a 15 back in the day, back when they were more strict in the 90s, but it's uncut these days.
Yeah, that's good.
So just worth mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm pretty sure the Yippee-ki-yay mother effer line was cut out of the UK version, because they had this weird thing where, okay, you've got 17 F-bombs, but if you cut it down to 8, we'll give you the rating you want. Like, what difference does the number of F-bombs actually make? Like, if you've heard an F-bomb, you've heard an F-bomb. Like, what?
Yeah. I've always disagreed with that. I've also disagreed with, I mean, Marvel took advantage of this back during, like, Phase 2, where you can say shit, but, like, you're still limited to the one F-bomb. And I'm like, I feel like anyone who's going to care about the amount of profanity is also going to be upset with how many times a character says shit as well.
Shit's just not acceptable. In fact, hell, we can say it on YouTube. I don't make us not say it, because YouTube's fine with saying shit. I
don't... If you're going to cater to an audience, just cater to them. This feels like they're trying to skate by the rules and say, like, well, technically we're doing everything right.
Yeah. That said, though, it has presented as this weird world where, because a PG-13 can have one F-bomb, is that the F-bomb can tend to have a lot of impact, because if you've not heard an F-bomb the whole movie and then you get one, it actually can either be extremely funny if used the right way, or can be extremely impactful and like a really like, oh no, he meant what he just said, because he's dared to say that when we've not heard it the whole time. So
yeah,
I don't think you'd see that same restraint in most movies if they could just have them flying thick and fast.
No, it's absolutely one of those things where it's only because it's banned that we have to put so much effort into like making it really count. If it were just you can use as much as you want, nobody would care. In fact, I
won't say nobody, because I do think occasionally you'll have someone who has like in the same way that we're going to do everything handheld until this one scene where everything becomes serious, and it's going to like some directors would absolutely do that and say we're just going to have one F-bomb and it's going to have a lot of impact, but it would be like 1% of the time versus the 100% that it happens now in PG-13 movies.
I will say one of the trivias I've read that kind of goes into that same thing is that there is, at the end of this movie, a very, I wouldn't say out of place, it fits well enough, but there is a sex scene. It's not hypergraphic or whatever, but it is
not at all
there. And apparently that was literally just inserted into the script because the writer was like, look, there's no way we're getting a PG-13 rating anyway. Let's just throw that in because why not?
What's funny, though, is that I'm pretty sure this scene could be in a PG-13.
Yeah, nowadays. I don't know about back then.
I mean, a woman in a bra? That's too much.
Jeremy Irons ripping open her shirt. That's the part that I'd be like, maybe a bit much.
Aggressive shirt opening? I guess. Okay.
Look, I don't pretend to understand the MPAA. I have no idea how they make their decisions.
I mean, it's fair. So the subject you brought up there, before we get to spoilers, I want to bring this up, because I had this realization when I was thinking about it. Not recently, this was a while ago, I had this realization, is that I'm pretty sure Die Hard with a Vengeance was how I learned about racism.
That is strange, but okay. I'm interested in this.
I just because I was watching this fairly young, right? I was probably like 7 when I first saw this, maybe 8, something in that range. And I grew up around mostly white people. It was just not a subject that had come up,
right?
And I'm pretty sure Die Hard with a Vengeance was how I learned a lot of things, a lot of my basis of understanding about race and race relations in America and New York, the idea of Harlem being a more sort of black neighborhood, that kind of thing. Right. All of it, the racial slur, like I learned it from this movie.
Damn. All right.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that's where you should learn it. It's just a realization I had at one point that I'm pretty sure this would have been my first exposure to all of that.
That makes sense. I mean, it's interesting to me because obviously the early 90s up until the mid 90s, you did have a lot of these racial tensions across the board. And I like that this movie is not, I don't know, shying away from it. It is something that is brought up. What was the other one that we did? I think it was like Volcano that did kind of the same thing.
It was
in a
more
way.
Awkward than Volcano.
Right. That's the thing, because by the time Volcano ended, they made it an Aesop. They made it this thing of like, oh no, see, we're all the same underneath it all. And it made it feel like it's a children's like moral story rather than the complicated and destructive topic it actually is. And I like the way that it's brought up in here is that it isn't trying to solve racism. It's just using it as a thing and saying, yeah, it's there. Like, it's part of the story. And by the end of it, like, nothing gets fixed. Like, no one's saying, like, and now there's the O.J. Simpson trial is currently ongoing and everyone will be happy with the way that turns out. Like, no, clearly not.
No, I mean, the only thing that changes by the end is the idea of how much respect the two main characters have for each other. But there's nothing is altered or fixed or whatever. In fact, there's a couple of little lines in this that, as I've grown up, I've understood better, or I've realized what. Because I mean, hell, Samuel L. Jackson at one point in this movie cracks a dark joke about Rodney King. Which I definitely did not get that when I was a kid or even a teenager. That's something I didn't know about until I was at least in my 20s.
Right.
And it you know, because I'll just spoil what the line is, because we're not in spoilers yet, but it's not like that much of a moment. But basically, once he hears that, you know, McClane had something in LA a few years ago, he's like, oh, so you were like you did something famous in LA? He's like, yeah, for like 5 minutes. And he goes, oh, let me guess, Rodney King. And McClane just immediately says, F you. Like, he just responds with F you. Don't, you know, dare attach me to that.
I didn't take it as an anger thing. I took it more as just like a, yeah, screw you.
Oh, like, yeah. I wasn't trying to imply he was angry. But more just, like, he beats it away immediately. It's not something that is lingered on. Right. But it's such a quick little line that it plays well into Jackson's character, because his character Zeus, you know, from the get-go is pretty, like, you know, combative with this stuff, and is very on guard with dealing with the police.
Yeah, Samuel L. Jackson apparently very much modeled the character after reading about Malcolm X, and based a lot of stuff off of that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that it does with him is that in his introduction in the movie, it shows that he's a very smart man. It shows that he is, you know, he's talking to his nephews and he's telling them to stay in school, and he's very forth-thinking and talking about how, oh, this is stupid. You've listened to this guy about this radio, which is clearly stolen. This will get you into trouble. And he's trying to keep them on the straight and narrow. And it's not like it definitely presents him as this well put together guy with like a lot of, you know, he's very confident in his opinions and his ideals and everything else. But maybe the one thing that he is quick to jump to a conclusion on is dealing with John McClane. Now, admittedly, the way he meets John McClane, he's got reasons to jump to some conclusions, to be fair. I'm not saying he's in the wrong, but...
At the beginning of this sequence, at the beginning of this movie, they specifically say, like, hey, John, you need to go to the street corner, and, like, we've got instructions and whatnot. And maybe I missed it. Maybe I missed the part where they said this specific bit. But he keeps on saying, like, yeah, don't worry, I'm going to be dead long before that. And I'm like, oh, they're that sure that, like, the terrorists are going to be camping out and, like, going to kill John McClane while he's on the street corner? And then it shows why he's talking about that, which we will get to. And I'm like, oh, no.
Yeah. No, they deliberately don't let you hear that part. They cut away from the phone call just before he gets the details about what he's supposed to wear when he goes to Harlem. So anyway, I feel like we're starting to get ready to talk about the movie. So let's say spoiler warning for Die Hard 3, shall we?
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I'll say is that we kind of just jumped off the cast a little bit, but I don't think there was really a bad performance in this movie. I think everyone did their roles well, and I liked it the whole way through. Yeah,
even a couple of small ones just to mention is, like, there's a guy, he's not from the FBI because he says he's from another agency, but he's wearing his glasses. That actor in recent years was in Mr. Robot. He was recently in the Fallout TV show, so he's an actor I recognize from those. And also, one of the cops in this movie is actually also in Die Hard 1. And it's the sort of thing...
I heard that, yeah.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where I never noticed that... I've noticed it in Die Hard 1 after seeing Die Hard 3, because obviously he's got a bigger role in this one, so I recognize his face. And then when you watch Die Hard 1 again, you're like, wait a minute, this random cop that has like 2 lines outside the building is that guy from 3. I don't think he's meant to be the same character, because there's like no...
Nah, this strikes me as one of those things that, like, you occasionally get on longer running TV shows like Doctor Who and whatnot, where there's an actor who's in a bit part in one episode, and then they come back as a larger role in the second one, and it's just like clearly they weren't going to mention they were in the first one because then they wouldn't be allowed to star in the next one.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. If I was to guess, I would say he's probably friends with McTiernan. That would be my guess.
That's possible, yeah.
And it's like, hey, no one's going to remember you were in Die Hard 1. It was like a minor, like nothing. You were basically an extra. So let's just have a few more lines in this one. So
this was Michael Christopher is the actor.
I'll take your word for it.
I'm just looking through seeing if there is any sort of overlap with the other works of McTiernan. I'm not recognizing any.
He's got a small role in Last Action Hero, which is McTiernan.
All right, that's not on my. I'm on the Wikipedia page, not the IMDb. So
at least I think that was him. Maybe it was someone else I clicked on that said that. But regardless, yeah. Oh well, no, it was him. It was him because it's Ricky is his name in this one. So yeah, he's one of the cops in Last Action Hero, a movie that we'll no doubt do at some point for some season or another.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll pop up. We got to do Schwarzenegger season eventually, right?
Yes, of course. So spoilers for Die Hard with a Vengeance. I'll just warn once again since we're going to get into it here. Hot Town, Summer in the City. Yeah.
I don't know the rest of the lyrics, but I would continue.
Yeah, that's how the movie starts. There's an explosion at a department store and chaos in the police station. It is a very bold choice, and it does feel very different from Die Hard 1 and 2 to start with, the bad guys did something, and we're seeing the reaction of the regular people first before we get to what the hell John McClane's going to do with any of this. And of course, the guy asked for McClane. It's honestly, like, we're in spoilers now, so we can just say it. I don't know what I thought when I watched this as a kid for the first time, but if I was watching this for the first time now, I would have to assume that I would immediately just jump to the conclusion that the bad guy with a German accent has something to do with Hans Gruber.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well. Like, once they got to the part where the FBI is interrogating him and saying, like, you know, do you recognize this guy? Do you do any of that? I'm sitting there. I mean, I knew going into it that he was the brother just because I think it's come up in previous reviews here. But I was thinking there should be a point when the FBI is questioning you about, like, your stuff at Nakatomi Plaza that you might be able to just get those two neurons connected and be like, German guy, wait a minute, I have a connection now.
Yeah, I just thought I've been doing it every episode. There's no way McClane could know that Hans Gruber was Simon's bro, and that's what made it that's what made it Die Hard with a Vengeance with Samuel L. Jackson. That's another lyric from the Die Hard song.
I'll get to it. You said after 4, right? I can listen to it after next week's?
Yes. Cool. Actually, no, you can listen to it before because they did the verse for 4 based on the trailer. The movie hadn't come out yet, so there's no spoilers for the 4th movie in the song.
All right, fair enough. I'll listen to it when the episode's done.
Boom, there you go. So, no, like, it makes it clear. I mean, I actually just like the chaos of this, where, like, the other cop lady is like, hey, Captain, phone. And he's like, not now. He's like, I think you should take this.
At first, I thought it was something to be related to, like, oh, John McClane's on the phone and he's, like, already involved. But then no, it's immediately just like, all right, we're going to play a game, have some fun.
Well, no, because we have to start this movie with McClane where he's in his worst place yet, where he's suspended from the force right now. He's just being a drunk. And when we first meet him, when we cut to him in the van, and he's just kind of like, he's out of it. He's got a headache. I mean, there's a running gag in this movie that he keeps wanting aspirin. Can't find any.
This all takes place over the course of, I would say, I mean, they say it ends at 3 p.m. It's got to be early morning when it starts. So, all in all, it takes place over the course of like 6 hours tops.
Yeah, 7, 8, maybe.
Like the average school day, most likely.
Yeah, I feel like the explosion that starts before the school day started, and then once we get into it, you know,
yeah. But no, I mean the fact that he starts off this movie coming off of a bender, clearly hungover, and by the end of it, he still wants aspirin. Like that doesn't just wear off this quickly.
Yes, and I can't imagine all the loud noises and explosions and impacts that he's suffered over the course of the movie have done anything good for his headache either.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, there's all touch in this scene that I really like though is that the captain, what's his name, Cobb, as he's talking to him, he tries to get a little personable. And he's like, "Hey, how you doing, John? Like, they're the kids. Have you spoken to Holly?" And John just kind of like slouches and goes, "No, I've not spoken to her." And the scene continues for a minute as they're talking about like what he's going to do, and then McClane, almost like in a delayed reaction, just sort of like gets angry and says, "You know, mind your effing business. Like, ask me about Holly."
I think the captain brings it up one more time. Like he says something about like, yeah, you know, you and the wife, and he's just like, nah, let's stop that now. I'm not a part of that.
Yeah. But yeah, he's also very distressed when they tell him that the backup will be 10 blocks away. Yes. And he's like, wait, what? 10 blocks? That you can't get to me very quickly in 10 blocks.
I forget the line he says, but there is something just like, okay, so I'm just on my own then. Great, cool, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, they've strapped a gun. They've taped a gun to his back, which, to be fair, it's something he did to himself in Die Hard 1, so he's used to having a gun strapped there. I wouldn't be surprised if
he was the one who suggested it. He's like, guys, I did the coolest thing back when I was in LA.
Yeah. So we find out that he is to walk around Harlem wearing nothing but his underwear and a sandwich board with basically a statement saying that he hates black people.
Yes, in not so many words.
No, with some harsher language, which I will not be repeating.
Apparently, and I appreciate this, one is that when they shot the scene, it was blank, and that was just CGI'd on there. So they understood not to walk around Harlem with that.
For 1995, or even 1994 probably, when they were actually shooting it, that's actually, see today if they said, oh, we'll just do it with blank board and we'll CG it in later, wouldn't think twice. That's just such a normal thing to do nowadays for certain things that you wouldn't even consider. But for 1995, like saying, you know what, this may look a bit shit because it's only 1995, but it's still not worth actually writing on the board in the real location, because it will actually, even if someone sees it off in a distance, it's not worth upsetting someone. Let's just do it this way. So,
and then the alternative is that apparently during TV broadcasts, they edit it to say "I hate everybody" instead. So
that makes it really funny though when Samuel L. Jackson sees him and says, "Oh, I better go and talk to him. Phone the police. Someone's about to get killed." And I'm like,
"Yeah,
what? Are people really upset about someone saying they don't like everyone?"
He's pissing off everybody, Pete.
But yeah, we get Zissy's introduction with his nephews. And he doesn't even see him at first. It's the kids that see him and say, "Hey, uncle, come and see this. There's a white man outside."
There's a white guy in the street. I've seen a white guy in the street. Not like this.
Dear. And he goes over, the whole thing plays out, and like there's this group of guys that Zeus is concerned are going to see him and it's going to get violent. So, but obviously when things start to heat up, McClane quite quickly is like, all right, I'm a cop. See that explosion earlier today? Yeah, the guy did that, said I need to do this, he was going to blow up somewhere else. So whatever. And
yeah, he's like, Zeus, just help me out through this. And he's like, oh god, all right, fine, just pretend you're crazy.
Yeah, pretend you've just gotten out of a mental hospital. We'll run with that. Not that it works very well, but they try their best.
Yep.
So yes, they end up having a bit of a, not a scuffle, but McClane
McClane gets knocked around a little bit. They cut off the sandwich board, and then Zeus sees the gun taped to his back, and he uses that to be able to hijack a taxi and get out of there.
Yes, and it's a little point. I almost wish they'd come back to this in some way in the movie. Now that I'm thinking about it. Because Zeus has a line in the cab where he says, "Oh, do you have any idea what they're doing to my shop?" Because these guys know who Zeus is.
Yeah,
they know where he works. It would have been interesting to see the consequences of him sticking his neck out to help this guy. Something that comes up. Quite
I mean, I don't even think I would have needed to see the consequence. I would have been fine with that being the recurring thing of like, the one of the reasons that he's sticking around is to get like money back for what's going to happen to his shop or something like that.
I mean, I do like the way McClane tricks him in a little bit to keep him on board, because he doesn't he ends up sort of like going to the station with them, and then obviously once they have the next phone call or two from Simon, it's like, hey, you're the Samaritan's involved now. He's going to be hanging out with McClane, and he's like, I'm not doing that. I'm not a cop. I'm just going to leave.
Yeah, Simon's upset that someone helped John McClane out of that situation, and like it seems like he's going to let. He calls him the Samaritan, but he's gonna let Zeus go, And then Zeus is just like chewing him out on the phone. He's just
I believe the line was, you can stick your well-laid plans up your well-laid ass.
Yes, that is the line. And at that point, that's where Simon's like, you know what? You're part of this now. You got to do all the things I was going to make John do. I don't like you.
To me, there's a really interesting choice that's made later, though, that stuck out with this in mind, is that later on, there's a moment right before McClane goes into the vault and Zeus is handing off the suitcase bomb to the fake cops, who he doesn't know they're bad guys, but he's handing off this bomb. And the fake bad guy, or the fake cop, I should say, phones Simon and says, hey, McClane's getting in there, you're going to kill him, great, it's time to finally kill him. And he says, okay, what about the other guy? He's coming up to me right now. And he's like, and there's a pause, and he, let him go. Right, he actually makes the choice to let us just go, even when he's going to be done and kill McClane. And I thought that was an interesting choice, to not make him just outright completely evil in every way, shape, or form. Oh, this guy doesn't need to be killed. This would just be petty. You can let him go. And that ties into the whole outcome of the school thing as well, I suppose, later on. He literally has a line later where he's like, I'm not a monster. I'm a bad guy, but I'm not a monster.
I mean, I get what you're saying, and I agree. I think that is supposed to be like an earlier hint to where he's like, I don't, this doesn't need needless deaths. Like, I'm only going to do what's absolutely necessary here, and that would just be needless. But I also wonder if it's kind of a writing thing where it's like, we need a way to be able to get this bomb taken care of, and we can't have him get into a firefight at this point because there's no way for him to fight back. So we're just gonna allow him to live,
Yeah, I mean, I think you're looking at it from how are they doing this to solve a problem, or I'm looking at it as, okay, they made an interesting choice here by having the character who's the villain make this choice, and there's no way to know which came first. But even if it didn't come first, it's still an interesting way of doing it. Would say, oh, this doesn't ruin our villain by having him make this choice. It's an interesting little touch. But yeah, so yeah, McClane and Zeus are told to go to a payphone somewhere in the city by a certain time. Get running.
Well, they also they have the bomb. They found another bomb, some random place.
Yeah, they found a suitcase bomb, which notably it was in Chinatown, and McClane asks that question and then lies to Zeus about it and says, oh, that bomb in there, we found that in Harlem, so it could be Harlem that's hit next, so you should probably help me. Yeah,
because Zeus tries to walk out. He's like, look, you're a white guy. He's got a problem with you. He's clearly a white guy. This has nothing to do with me or my people, my community. And he's like, look, this guy doesn't care about skin color. He's going to blow up whoever. I need your help because you're involved in this, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, actually, another line here I liked that really landed on a watch in my 20s or 30s is just pointing out that the reason why he even stepped in to help McClane wasn't necessarily because he was just doing it because, oh, this poor white man's going to get hurt. It's more that, oh, if someone like him gets killed in Harlem, there's going to be, I mean, I think his line is 1,000 cops. I don't know if it's going to be quite that many, but there's going to be a lot of cops in Harlem in the next few days with itchy trigger fingers. So he's referencing the idea that a lot of innocent people in his neighborhood might end up getting shot just because people are looking for revenge, looking for a scapegoat, an excuse, whatever it is.
And I like that moment, but also just because he went out there and was trying to talk down John before he knew that he was a cop.
Yeah.
So it's obvious that he is just lying here. He was doing it because he's a good person at heart. But he's saying this as no, I did it because if a white cop is killed, then there are a lot more cops that are going to come in. So he's just trying to make it this thing of no, I'm not involved. And he just makes up a reason for it.
Yeah. I suppose you could argue, would he have kept helping as much as he did if it didn't turn out that McClane was a cop? Now, admittedly, does he know for sure that he's telling the truth? Maybe not, but the gun strapped to his back, I mean, I guess he could just be a crazy man. He doesn't know one way or the other, but I mean...
But he at least believes him enough to, when the gang is approaching him, for Zeus to say, okay, if you want to make it out of this, you got to at least pretend to be crazy. He's trying to vouch for him here.
Yeah. And to be fair, McClane, his attempt at sounding crazy isn't that good. He just kind of goes, I've got a really bad headache. I've got a really, really bad headache.
Yeah. As good as he is coming up with plans on the fly, he doesn't strike me as being good at improv. He just kind of is like, sure, whatever.
I think he's good at improvising. Not like an acting improv, but he's good at improvising solutions to things. I don't think this works though, because he's literally been put in a situation where, like, he's at a disadvantage, and he's he's the bad guy here, right? To everyone else around him, he's the bad guy, and I think that's difficult for him to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing with they bring in the suitcase bomb is that they walk through exactly how it works. They show that it's a tiny little suitcase bomb, but if you mix together these two liquids, it becomes armed, and it is wildly explosive, where the bomb tech drops like a single drop on the edge of a pin, and it's enough to blow this chair up into the ceiling.
Yes, and Colleen Camp is not happy with him when he does that. And now this is actually quite smart, because they basically establish. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't real explosives that are like this, where two liquids mix and that just instantly, within about 10 seconds, they go boom. But real or not, this is quite smart in the context of this movie, just because it sets up exactly how these work, that these two liquids will mix. It's clear and red. They'll mix, and then there'll be an explosion. Yep. Because this pays off multiple times later on when we're in situations where one of these things is because, you know, these bad guys are using the exact same type of explosive the entire movie. They're all made out of the same stuff. So it sets up and gets the audience expectations. So it's exposition, but it's very good exposition for later, because we have shorthand to understand everything that's going on. That's a little bit unique from just having a countdown timer.
Right.
So,
yeah,
you know, good. That adds a little bit of it's unpredictability to it, because it's not an exact number or science. So
yeah, and it's great because obviously we have these two liquids, and then later on in the movie they play with the idea of like, well, it could be any two liquids. Like, we're able to fool you by using the shorthand that we built up over the movie to then make you think that something's a bomb when it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. So they go out to this payphone, and there's a problem, because there is a large woman using the phone, to which Zeus, when McClane tries to be, this is a testament to the police skills of John McClane, is that even with his headache and the fact that he's feeling like absolute shit, is still able to try and be nice to the stranger, whereas Zeus is like, police business, get away from the damn phone.
Zeus literally just goes full Samuel L. Jackson here. Like, that's just 100%. He just broke character. It's just like, get your damn ass off the phone. Hangs it up. Yeah. I do like how McClane calls him out, though, and says, like, hey, just to be clear, you can't say police business. I can say police business. You, not so much.
Yeah, but then just makes him admit that he needs him. And sort of gives him a little ultimatum, and he sticks around, of course. I think what I'm realizing as we're talking about this a little bit is, like, there's a lot of stuff in this movie, particularly with Zeus's character, where he tries to act a certain way, act tough, like he doesn't care about, like, McClane or the other white people around. But there's multiple times in this movie where he kind of, like, shows that he's a good person at heart, and, like, goes out of his way to save people around him. I'm thinking not too long from now in the subway, where he's, like, telling people to duck, and he actually pulls the cop that was trying to arrest them out of the way. Like, the movie goes out of its way to show that he is a good person regardless of who he's helping, even if at face value he initially says he doesn't want to help them, he doesn't care about them because he sees them as the other, the enemy, whatever.
Yeah, I think in his head, rationally, he knows that he should be upset and angry at, like, this group of people who have, like, put him down his whole life and have made things difficult for him and his entire race. But, like, I think that just in the goodness of his heart, like, he can't shake that empathetic thing of, like, nah, I care about everyone to some extent.
Yeah, he's just too much of a good man, even though he pretends that he isn't. And that actually makes him quite an interesting character. So it's cool. So yeah, there's the joke first, right, where Simon says there's a bomb in the bin next to them, and they have to solve this little riddle, or it'll go off.
He calls him up and is just like, oh, I was going to St. Ives, there was a man with wives and sacks and cats and kittens, blah, blah, blah. And you're supposed to basically multiply it up to say how many it is. And Zeus realizes, like, he does the math, he gets the correct number, but then he realizes it's a trick question, and the actual answer is just 1. So then they have to dial the number 1, and it connects back up to him.
Yeah. But then Simon says, oh, no. You're too late. You're 10 seconds late, so it's going to go off. right? So they both dive for cover and like cause a little mini panic. Although the New York crowd don't actually dissipate that much. And then they go back to the phone and he's just laughing his ass off and he says, "I never said Simon Says."
That's another thing I thought would come back, like that he actually took the idea of Simon Says seriously, and like he would give them a thing to do, and then they like realized, wait a minute, we can get around it because he didn't say Simon Says.
I think it's probably something, the transition from the Simon Says script to the Die Hard 3 script, that was probably diminished quite a bit. But I think you get away with only using it once because it's such a commonly known thing, is the idea of Simon Says, so him just cracking that joke once works. I think if anything, to bring it back round, I'd have had maybe McClane like use it somehow.
Yeah.
In some way later on. Like maybe he claims that something's about to happen to the villain to make him do something, and then it doesn't. He just goes, "Oh, I never said Simon Says." Like it wouldn't be out of character for McClane to crack that joke, I don't think.
Oh, definitely not. Nah,
that would definitely work. But yeah, so anyway, they have to get to this other phone in a subway station, which is, I mean, they've got
it's like 90 blocks away.
Yeah, 90 blocks away. They've got 30 minutes to get there, which they say is absurd in New York traffic. They'll never make that.
Look, I have been to New York. I wouldn't go 9 blocks in 30 minutes.
So this is just a fantastic sequence of them like trying to get there. Commandeering a cab. You know what?
I love Zeus specifically. Like they hop in the cab and Zeus is like, "All right, look, I drove a cab for a while. The fastest route to go is like this south." And then John just flips it around, starts going east apparently, and it's like, okay, well, you're going the entirely wrong direction. You're headed in the way of Central Park. And it's like, yeah, the park's the fastest way to get there. And Zeus points out, like, Park Avenue is still going to be just as busy. It's like, I didn't say Park Avenue. I said the park.
Yes. And this entire sequence of them driving through the park and beating their horn, getting people out the way, jumping off the rock, back out of the road, you know, and, you know, I think they cover like a third of their distance with this little trick. This is basically the basis for the Die Hard 3 part of the trilogy video game that came out on the PS1.
Okay.
Because like basically there was 3 mini games on it. There was Die Hard 1, which was like a third-person shooter in a building. Die Hard 2 was like a light gun game at an airport. And then the third one was a driving game, which was basically Crazy Taxi, but you're trying to get to explosives to stop them from going off. But it was memorable of the 3 because in first-person mode, if you're in the car, when you hit civilians, you'd get blood on the windshield, and then the wipers would get it away, which was pretty gory for a PS1 game in like 1996 or whatever it was.
God damn.
So
they can't say the F word more than once, but they can kill civilians on the friggin' dashboard. Jesus.
Oh, the video game rating system was in its infancy in the 90s. We'll just say that. It was the Wild West. Anyway, so and then there's like the second trick, which is that's McClane calls an ambulance so they can follow behind the ambulance.
I like how they don't call in and say, "Hey, I'm an officer. I need an escort. Like, I need someone out here ASAP." He specifically calls it a fake thing of like, 2 officers down, need an ambulance, and he just coasts behind the ambulance the whole time.
Yeah, less explaining, I guess. I did appreciate though because basically when they get to the part where the ambulance was going, Zeus says, "Oh, why didn't you say it was further down? We could have followed it the whole way." And McClane says, "No. If I'd said it was there, then they'd have sent an ambulance from this other hospital because we're past that street." And I thought, that makes a lot of sense. New York, presumably has however many hospitals, and depending on what location the crisis is in, that would dictate which hospital sends out an ambulance. So
this movie feels like, I mean, maybe all of it's fake. I don't know. But this movie feels like like a New Yorker's little like point at the screen and be like, "Oh, I know that. I'm aware of that." Like it feels like it was made by someone who really, really knows the area of Manhattan. Like this doesn't feel like the sort of thing you can just look up online and say, "Oh yeah, that makes sense."
I mean, if nothing else, I'm sure the street names and the distances are pretty accurate, even if a lot of the other stuff isn't. Because it's actually kind of, now you mention it, not only do we get like this talk of the different, at least a few of the hospitals during this bit, and we obviously talk a lot about the subways because we're going to these different phones that are different subway parts of the city, but later on we're talking a lot about the schools, and we obviously eventually get to a specific school, but Like, they said at one point, I think there's 1,000 schools in New York, and I'm like, really? I know this city's big, but that's a lot of schools.
I feel like if we're talking about New York City and the entire like metro area, yes. If we're just sticking to Manhattan, I can't believe that. There's no way there's that many schools in just Manhattan.
Yeah, I was thinking they just meant Manhattan. If I was to guess in Manhattan, I would say there's like maybe 50 schools?
Hold on, I want to see if anyone's already answered this. How many schools in Manhattan? There are 870 public schools in Manhattan.
I mean, that's actually quite close to the 1,000.
Yeah, that's very high. Here we go. New York City public schools, so the entire metro area, contains 1,852.
That's a lot of schools.
Yeah, it's a densely populated area, man.
I guess it is, because that is a shit ton of schools. Fair enough. I assumed they were inflating that number, but not by that much.
Nah, I mean, that's modern data. God only knows what it was back in the 90s as well. I'm sure they didn't open that many schools, but some amount of difference.
Yeah. It's maybe possible they've condensed it a little bit by like combining some schools in the years since, perhaps.
Are you telling me that the underprivileged youth areas, you think they wouldn't put more funding to, Pete? That seems pretty racist.
Yes, I'm saying the American government of New York is a little bit racist, yes.
Yeah, just a bit.
Yeah.
I will say that is one thing later on in this movie, just skipping ahead briefly, is when they do eventually show the school that has the bomb in it, I thought back to the earlier thing of, oh, this guy, he doesn't care about skin color, he'll do whatever. But I'm like, that is a very predominantly black neighborhood that you have put this bomb in. It feels a little intentional.
No, I think that they imply it is intentional, because they imply that he picked that school because of what's his face? Zussi's connections to the kids, because his nephews go there. McClane suggests that in the car.
I would have missed that, because I thought they would have had that thing delivered before Zeus was even involved.
No, because they say in the movie it arrived at like 10:30.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
All right. He does some good research very quickly.
Yeah, well, I mean, admittedly, it is a little far-fetched, but McClane, because when McClane tells him, oh, that this is what the 21st president is in the car, and they're in the middle of a car chase, so it's all kind of yelled quite quickly. He says, wait a minute, that's the school my nephews go to.
Right.
And McClane has a line of being like, oh, why didn't you tell me that's where they went? Because like it makes sense he would target that because of you.
Yeah, that's fair.
So they do at least imply that was an intentional decision because of Zeus, rather than anything else.
Fair enough.
So, yeah. Is it far-fetched? That's a little bit, but whatever.
They were just on standby. There were actually like 15 of those fridges that could have gone to any of the schools at a drop of a hat.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they were on the way to a different school, and then Simon quickly phones up his courier and is like, hey, change the plans, take it to this school instead.
Wait. I thought of a better riddle involving the 21st president. Take it over there.
It's not really much of a riddle. What's 21 out of 42? There's 21 again.
I mean, you say that, but I would have been stuck on math. I would have said the answer is like, oh, it's the halfway home because it's half of 42. Genius.
I do appreciate, though, that they do spend some time thinking about, oh, what's 21? Okay, blackjack.
Right.
They think of some different things that 21 could mean. And it's not until they make the Hillary Clinton joke where they go, wait a minute, who's the 21st president?
Nobody knows, because nobody remembers Chester A. Arthur.
No. Until they introduce a really likable guy who's really up in his history in New York, and he happens to know.
Such a cool dude.
Yeah.
Anyway, we fast forwarded the plot a little bit there. So the phone call after they get back on, he says, okay, I've planted a bomb all the way downtown. It's at a train station. You need to make that distance. And after the ambulance bit, they basically say, okay, we're out of ideas. So John says, let's split up. I'm going to try to get onto the train. You keep going to the payphone, and hopefully one of us will be successful.
Yeah, he's like, oh, we should be ahead of the train because of how much we've kind of sped through like half the city. He's a bit late though, so we get kind of our classic, opening up the grate and jumping onto the roof of the train.
Down, yeah.
Yeah, which I'm sure it's a lot harder to lift one of those things up. John just whips it up like it's nothing, like he's opening a door.
Yeah.
But we get like a fun sequence of him looking through the train, trying to find the explosive. At least one woman
he's acting like the crazy subway guy. He's just going around to people like, "Excuse me, lift your feet, thank you."
Yeah, at least one woman thinks he's a pervert and screams at him, and he just kind of like has to quickly move on from it. Finds it in like a fake little like phone box thing, a little police phone box, and sort of tries to take it to the back of the train. The idea being that he can throw it off the back of the train keeps moving, it'll at least be away from people. It'll lift the tunnel up, so the train's all going to be cancelled, but that's, less of a problem. Samuel L. Jackson's character Zeus, in the meantime, gets to the subway. The guard, or the subway cop, whatever we're calling him, he notices him just jump over the stalls, so he's like, "Hey, you!" And he chases him down. So we end up with this situation where he's holding a gun at Zeus. After, by the way, Zeus has had to yell at a rude man who refuses to get off the payphone.
Look, we are now in the era of cell phones, but obviously not mass adoption yet.
Yes.
I am amazed at how often there's the issue of this payphone is taken up. Like, just from my modern sensibility, I can't imagine the fact of any more than like one person being in line at a time.
I think 1995, it's definitely a crossover period where a lot of people didn't have mobile phones yet. Certainly we weren't at the stage yet where kids had them, because I remember that being that was like 1999, 2000, where I remember a lot of kids in my school getting them all of a sudden.
Yeah, I remember being on the school bus and like a kid sitting in front of me had like one of those little slide up ones, and I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
So yeah, we're definitely still in the era of like this being mixed, and because there's even a line later on where it stops working and McClane like says, "Oh, these effing cell phones,
these cellular phones."
Yeah, so it's definitely still a newer thing, relative anyway. Obviously, yeah, you had the big bricks in the 80s, but like, as with any technology, it had to mature a bit before it was ready for everyone to get on board.
Right. So yeah, Samuel L. Jackson, the phone starts ringing. They do the bit where the cops got him at gunpoint, and he's like, "I have to pick up the phone now. Please don't shoot me." And he ends up doing it, but Simon's like, "Where's McClane?" He's like, he's catching up. And then Simon's like, "Well, that's against the rules. It's going to blow up now. Bye." Yeah.
So we get a sequence where the train, he throws the bomb off the back of the train, but it explodes fairly close. So that it does affect the train, and the back car does kind of kick up and come across the platform. And like we said, Samuel L. Jackson jumps in and saves the cop who was pointing the gun at him before. So a little heroic move from him, and you get the funny bit of McClane sort of climbing out the train car, covered in dust and dirt, and just sort of laughing because it's this shit again. I can't escape this. Every couple of years, one of these goddamn terrorists just makes me go through hell.
I am happy though that they aren't doing the thing they did in Die Hard 2, where they're just really leaning on it and saying like, no matter where I go, it's just more terrorists every time.
No, I mean they do like a subtler one where as he's like jumping into the train, he says this is a bad idea, which is a line he did say in the first movie when he was like climbing, I think, down the elevator shaft.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I'm okay with repeated lines. I just don't like the fact of them leaning on the fact of it's a thing that keeps happening to him.
Oh, sure. Yeah. This one's at least different enough, though, that it doesn't feel, like if he was on like a boat or something and it was like, oh, there's a hostage situation again. Yeah. He's like, oh, here we go, third time.
Yeah, I guess that's the other thing is that, like, as much as you want to consider all of New York as being held hostage, really there is no hostage situation. It is just a bunch of running around getting the explosions, which is also against the idea of he has to just constantly take out guys with guns. Like, that isn't a part of this until the very end of the movie.
No. I mean, there's things about this that are absolutely very different from the first two, but there's also a lot of DNA that's still in there that some of the later films don't even bother adhering to. Yeah. So it is what it is.
Yeah, one other thing about this is that as they're, everyone's safe, everyone made it out, a few concussions or whatever, John points out, we should not have been able to have made this to begin with. So no matter what happened, he was going to blow that up. Yeah. And they don't know why yet, what's so special about this specific area, but this is that end of maybe Act 1, Act 2 that you were talking about before, where we immediately get the villain's plan laid out.
Yeah, this is where the movie opens up considerably, because up until now it's just been playing with McClane, but here it's like, no, there's a grander plan, and I do actually really like how this all plays out, where you've got like this FBI guy, and you've got the CIA guy. I assume that's what he is, but regardless, they're telling him about the Germans and like, hey, does the name Hans Gruber mean anything to you? And of course he's like, yeah, as a matter of fact, that one does ring a bell.
Yeah. They throw out like 3 names beforehand and then get angry that he doesn't know any of them because they're expecting him to have some relation to one of them at the very least. And then the one guy chimes in, he's like, Hans Gruber, and he's like, yeah, that one. I get that one. Yeah,
so like I do appreciate that, along with the sort of this the threat being laid out, which is they've put a bomb in a school, but we're not going to tell you which one, and if you try and evacuate the schools, we'll detonate it. I love that right after this, when they all make their plan of action, where it's like, okay, we're all going to go off and start searching these schools. He didn't say we weren't allowed to do that. He's also given McClane and Zeus another riddle to go do in the park, so they're off to go do that. I love the reveal at the end of this scene where the camera goes up as everyone's scattering, and Jeremy Irons, for the first time, this is the first time we see him in the movie, is at the top of a building looking down. And to be fair, if you're upset that later on it turns out the bomb in the school is a fake, he literally says in this very first time when he's looking down at the police all scattering, he says, they bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. So it makes complete sense there's no real threat.
Honest to God, by the time we hit that, like the bomb in the school part, I forgot about that. Like I registered it, I took it, and I was like, oh, the school thing is fake. And then by the time we hit that point in the movie, I'm like, oh God, the kids aren't out yet. What's gonna happen?
Yeah, no, I think it works, and the tension all works from everything, because it is a real thing. Because you can kind of read it as, oh, it's not that the bomb's fake, it's more just that the purpose of this is to make sure the police are nowhere near this part of the city so we can go do our big heist.
Yeah, it turns out that this specific part of the city is Wall Street. And as John points out later on when he starts putting everything together, there are no schools anywhere near Wall Street, but there is the Federal Reserve, which is right where the explosion happened, so that they're able to, and we see this whole thing play out. They pose as construction people to come in and go down into the subway tunnel to start clearing out the rubble, but in actuality, they're just breaking their way into the gold vault.
Which I love Jeremy Irons faking a German, faking an American accent. It's actually really good, because he sort of sounds like he's trying to do American, but he's German slipping through, which is so impressive because he's not German.
That was the Alan Rickman thing. Alan Rickman doing the exact same thing in the first movie.
Yeah, it's such a... If anything, though, that it slips through enough where I'm like, oh, the cop here, Ricky, should be catching that this is a bit... But at the same time, though, like, there's nothing to say that the guy doing the construction job could just be German. Yeah, he could just be German. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that.
He just had to throw on the accent because they would have recognized his voice from the calls from earlier.
Yes. So this is where we get introduced to the other main villains that run with him, and it's all this thing to, they've got some of them drilling through the rubble in the subway into the underground vault in the building as Jeremy Irons goes down from the elevator. There's a whole bit here where he, he's talking to the manager of the Federal Reserve, and he's like, oh, we're going to make a currency exchange, and no, we'll just take the withdrawal, thank you. And he just, they knock him out with
just kills the guy.
A syringe or whatever.
Oh yeah, that's right. It is just a knockout. That was one thing I found curious about this one.
Well, it could have been a murder, but we don't know what was in the syringe. But
yeah, that's fair. But it is strange to me that how they don't just go for the bullet shot. They instead go for this thing that just puts them theoretically to sleep. Whether that's murder or not, it's so much quicker and easier to just fire a shot.
Yeah, I guess it's to not attract attention here, because there's still, it's one thing down in the vault, right, where the guards are right outside the vault door underground, but up here, if there's some gunshots, it might attract, attention. People might hear them, people might call for the real police and stuff like that. I mean,
I can understand them not using guns, but it's one thing to put the guy to sleep with a syringe, but I'm pretty sure the security guard, they literally just stab in the stomach 5 times. Yes, it's quiet. It doesn't draw attention, but that dude's definitely dead rather than this peaceful little drug thing they cooked up.
Well, yeah, but you're kind of glossing over something there with that. Is that that's not Jeremy Irons. In fact, Jeremy Irons kind of like steps in and says, "I think he's dead," to imply that he's not really cool with how brutal this was. And it's clearly to set up that the woman who's like the sort of second in command or whatever, that she is psychotic, that she
Vicious,
is violent. She's got this big curved blade. And like, to be fair, the direction of this moment, when this security guard is like firing his gun off, and Jeremy Irons and like his team are just sort of around the corner, just patiently waiting for this to end. And she's like coming in from the other side of the vault because she's already like cut through the wall with the bulldozer or whatever. And the way like you see her on the security camera, and then you see her walking up, you see that curved blade, and then she does this like, you know, slits the side of the throat, spins round, slits the front, stabs him. Like it's properly brutal. She's clearly like unhinged.
Look, it is brutal. She's very clearly unhinged, but just because of the way it's so fluid, because of the way like it is choreographed, like I don't know, I found it a little bit corny in a little bit of the way. The first thing that popped into my mind was those fight scenes from the later Resident Evil movies where Alice is just like 100% God mode and she's just able to go through and cut people out like that. I'm like, all right, it's a little bit cheesy.
I think that's a bit of a stretch to compare it to the Alice shenanigans of the Resident Evil movies. But
If it went on for any longer, I would say no. I think it's fair. But the fact that Jeremy Irons comes in after 5 seconds and is like, that's enough.
The point I'm getting at though is that you were saying, oh, they might have just knocked out this guy, but they clearly killed this one. I think the two things I would say here is that this is clearly saying there's a difference between how Simon is with people,
right,
and then how this woman is with people. But also, this guard is firing a shotgun at them. They're kind of put in a situation. Whereas the bank manager, he
wasn't a threat.
He's not a threat. Yeah, they just because they even. I don't think they kill him just because they lower him down gently. That's my reason as to why he's still alive in a cupboard somewhere.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Because after all, keep in mind that the timeline of this, like they're out of here in like an hour, so it's not like they have to keep him knocked out for very long either.
They're ridiculous. This is that was one of the lines from the cop when he's letting the guy in. He's like, "Wow, you guys are efficient. You got here quick."
Yeah, and he's just like, "Oh, the mayor doesn't want to upset anyone. Like he wants this all to be done on the quick." So
I think he even puts on like the best accent. He's like, "Man, if we don't get this wrapped up before rush hour, you're looking at the mother of all backups."
Yeah, it's going to rain cats and dogs, I think he says at one point, which also stuck out as like a very American phrase that he was trying to slip in there. So this all plays out, and we get a sense of like who the villains are and whatever. And I do kind of like that when McClane and Zeus get to the park for the next thing with the phone, when it cuts back to Simon, who we get to just see having the phone call now, because we've revealed him to the audience, is like, damn, there's a lot of like loud noises in the background. You think McClane would be hearing some of this and being like, "Hey, what's all that noise in the background? What, construction stuff going on there?"
Yeah, what's happening there? I also do like the little character bit they have here is that when the FBI guys are introducing him, they specifically said that he suffered through migraines throughout his entire life. So throughout these sequences, you can see him like he's around all this construction equipment and he's just popping like ibuprofen or Tylenol or whatever, like it's candy.
Yeah. Also worth mentioning, when they went into this building in the vault, they killed Ricky, the other cop.
Yes.
And that'll come back up a little bit later.
And one guy took his badge,
Yeah, Otto took his badge. I remember they said it a few times, so I remember this one bad guy's name.
Yeah, I expected him to be a bigger deal. I expected him to be, the part in Die Hard where it's the big muscle fight. It's the guy who John McClane can't possibly manage to fight against, and he just gets his ass handed to him for a while. I was expecting that to be Otto, but no, Otto just dies completely unrelated.
No, long before Winter Soldier did it, McClane gets the elevator sequence where he's surrounded by bad guys and has to like get his way out of it by killing them all quickly.
He plays it like the exact same too. I was in shock at how similar that was to the elevator scene.
Yeah, well, this predates Winter Soldier by a good 20 years almost. So
yep,
steal from the best, I guess, if you're going to.
So over in the park, they get the riddle of the fountain, and it's this common math problem where you get 2 jugs, one 3-gallon, one 5-gallon.
It's funny you brought up Resident Evil, even though you were bringing up the horrible movies, because this is absolutely a Resident Evil puzzle. Like, I've done this in a Resident Evil game.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%.
So yeah,
you just got to take the jugs and then make it equal to 4 gallons, and that will disarm the bomb, which is set to go off at this point. So they do it in the nick of time. They manage to shut it off, and then at that point, they are told that they have to go to Yankee Stadium for the next part, but we don't actually get there because they come across a pair of kids who make the point, because they're like shoplifting a store, and they make the point of, all the cops are gone. Like, we could do whatever we want. You could steal City Hall right now. And that's where John's like, son of a bitch. This wasn't about the games at all.
Yeah, this is all a play. It's all a play for $140 billion in gold billion.
Mm-hmm. And this is exactly halfway in the movie where this realization comes in. This is exactly the midway point.
I do like how absurdly high the amount of money is that this is, because it's because there's a line at the end of the movie when Jeremy Irons says, "Tomorrow we decide which country we want to buy," and I'm like, 140 billion sounds like enough to buy a small country.
Yeah, absolutely. Hold on, 140 in 1995. Is worth 289 today.
That's a lot of billion.
Yeah, it's a lot of billions.
It's a lot of billions, yeah. Yeah, no, I like that. I also like the reaction, because when they first see all the gold behind the bars, like some of the sort of henchmen and the bad guys are just like, huh? It's so much. It's just Fort Knox.
And just to really get it across to the audience, Jeremy Irons is like, nah, man, Fort Knox doesn't even have this much gold. That's a tourist trap. This is where the real money is.
Yeah, well, it's the Federal Reserve. Yeah, there's a lot of money in here.
Totally makes sense.
Oh dear. Yeah, no, this realization is pretty strong. Because what's funny is that we find out that the Yankee Stadium was meant to be the end of the McClane story. Like, from Simon's perspective, that was meant to be where McClane would finally be killed. So they don't get to there for ages because McClane's like, no, we're going to go and investigate this. I want to go check out what they're up to. Let's go see if anything's happened at the Federal Reserve. And we get the elevator sequence that we mentioned. And of course, he realizes that something's afoot because he recognizes the other cop's badge number, which they do set up at the start. We never mentioned it, but, he's like, hey, just still play your lottery number, your badge number for the lottery. So he recognizes that.
6991.
So that's well set up. I think it's a fun little sequence in the elevator. Mainly because I just feel like a lot of good McClane fights, it's very kind of simple but visceral. There's one later on as well on the boat where he's just like ramming a door into someone's head, and it feels like he's just doing something quickly as possible to kill someone so that it's done, so that he can go do what he needs to do or survive. That
was the thing we said about McClane at the first part, is that it didn't feel like he's invulnerable. It feels like he is really being dragged through the paces here in every single one of these fights. And the elevator scene, I mean, technically he doesn't get shot or anything, but it does feel like, no, he is put through the paces here just trying to survive in this. And that's why he has to be so fast about it. And like, before anyone can react, he's already shot 2 guys, because otherwise they would absolutely be able to take him out. Yeah.
He's sort of like pinned against one guy, and he's got a gun into the back of Otto's head, and Otto's got his gun up against his stomach. But it kind of awkwardly, so it's not just like a one like face-to-face thing, which just gives it this kind of weird like shape almost of like what they're doing is like a pair of actors. So I like that. I also love as Zeus goes exploring in the big hole into the tunnel, finds McClane. And when McClane says, "Oh, they were here for this because one gold bar happened to fall off the truck," and Zeus is like, "Oh, I'm keeping this. I'll accept this for all my
hardships,
all my hardships, and all the taxes I've paid over the years. Like, yeah, I'll put my nephews through college."
I love the fact that he tries to like palm it at first. He's just like, I'll just pick this up. And then he realizes how gold heavy he is. And he's like, oh my God, he's got to walk out with like both hands dangling down.
Yeah. I mean, this is all right. But the payoff to this for me is when they ditch the car they steal here and like take this other guy's car because he's got like a car phone. And it just says like, "Oh, that guy is like super pissed," and McClane's like, "Oh, you'll feel better when he looks in the back seat."
Yeah.
And he's like, "That was my gold bar. God damn it!"
Son of a bitch.
I got a chuckle at me.
I like the idea that they weren't going to let Zeus keep the gold bar, and he's like, let him try to take it, but then this guy's just going to be able to get away with it.
Yeah. Well, the guy's got a choice. If he reports that his car was taken by a police officer and tries to make a fuss, they'll be like, "Oh, that means you must have a gold bar." But if he's smart, he'll be like, "Well, I could buy a car with the money from this gold bar and then just keep quiet."
I mean, in any other police investigation, they would have the car at the end of this, and they could just run the plates and say, "Here's the guy we got it from." But I can't remember exactly what happens, but I'm like 90% sure that this car has been totaled before the end of this movie, so...
Yes, I'm pretty sure they've probably lost track. In fact,
yeah.
No, it doesn't go into the water because that's the bad guy's tow truck. This car is upside down after a car chase later on.
Yes, that is this one.
Yes, so someone will find it, but I mean...
It might be a while. We got bigger fish to fry.
I mean,
so...
actually, a question. How, if you came into a gold bar like this...
Yes.
Like, how would you go about exchanging it into money?
I
mean, can't just walk into the bank and be like, "Here's my gold bar."
Oh, that's weird. It's got a code on the bottom that's imprinted directly to our bank. Yeah, no, I don't think there's any good way to do it legally or like through legitimate means. I think the best you could hope for is like shopping it around pawn shops and trying to find someone who's like just skeevy enough to really take it.
Or if you somehow get access to, like, I don't know how hot you have to get to melt gold, but some sort of big furnace.
It's not that much. It's not you could probably do it in not a conventional oven, but like all you have to do is like make a quick little oven. There's plenty of stuff online for that. Actually, it wouldn't work for him, but what I would do is I'd go to cashforgold.com and I'd just say like how much.
Dude, because if you could at least melt any of the markings off of it, it would, you know, at least you could at that point take it to like a jeweler's or something like that and be like, "Hey,
you could probably do that with just like a really hot iron on like a stove or something."
Yeah, just to obscure the engravings. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
I just looked it up. Melting point of gold is 1,000 degrees Celsius or 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So
you just said it wasn't that much. 1,000 Celsius is a lot.
I remember it being less. I don't know why I'm thinking it's not. I know that it's very malleable. That's the thing about gold.
Yeah, for comparison, when you're cooking something in the oven, you're typically at about 200 Celsius. So that's 5 times your typical oven temperature.
All right, hold on. Temperature of the sun.
Oh, that's way higher than 1,000.
So if you just take a really big magnifying glass and you aim it at the bar, that could work.
All right. Anyway, so
yes.
Wait. Oh, magnifying glass. I thought you said magnet there for a second, and I was about to say, wait, isn't gold one of the metals that isn't magnetic? I'm pretty sure I heard that.
Yes, that is correct. Today we'll be discussing all the chemical properties of gold.
Oh dear. Anyway, so this leads to the aqueducts because they're trying to find the dump trucks by just seeing where they are. Because hey, it's 14 dump trucks. Which, by the way, they mentioned at the start that someone stole 14 dump trucks, which is obviously tying into all this as well.
And John just dismissed it. He's like, it's insurance fraud. I've seen it a dozen times. No big deal.
There's a funny line though because they say, "Oh, who would have done that?" And then someone says, "Oh, John's landlady try to clear his apartment out."
They do think that the dump trucks are going to go across like a bridge, like the FDR bridge, I think they say. However, someone makes the point of they don't allow dump trucks to cross the bridge, which I don't think John was aware of. So then they do see that it goes off an off ramp and it ends up going, like you said, up these aqueducts, which will dump them out somewhere in the mountains, like way far away from the main city. Yeah.
It goes outside of the city past there was a map at one point. You could see exactly where it was going past.
Yeah,
but
I think they said like the Catskill Mountains or something like that.
Well, they actually find not one of their dump trucks, though. They end up running into just a solo dump truck, which is going to this aqueduct, but not going through it, just to that end, because that's where there's work being done. Yeah, they're building more of this thing. And it's like, okay. And so they go to this location and they ask the people working there, hey, has there been like a bunch of dump trucks going down here? It's like, yeah, some asshole showed up and like, he complains about it.
They took 14 dump trucks and went into the wrong side of the aqueduct. What a loser. And John's immediately like, all right, I'm going to need some maps and stuff.
Yeah. So he tells Zeus to go to Yankee Stadium and see what's there. McClane takes his new buddy, the truck driver that they just met, into the aqueduct. And it turns out that this truck driver is like a history buff and starts talking about the infrastructure of the city, the building of this duct, and just everything possible. He's into it all.
He's literally like, oh, you know what makes these ones so special? And John just slowly turns his head. He's like, no, what's that? And he's like, well, it's because of these outlet valves. And he just starts going off about valves. And John's like, that's great, man. Glad you're passionate.
But it's almost just to justify why he'll know who the 21st president is. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it worked. Like, I didn't question it when he mentions it.
Yeah, and even then, John doesn't even think to mention that to this guy. He's like, look, we found the guys. I'm going to go deal with them. You go get the head of police, tell them John McClane sent you, and tell him to find out who the 21st president was. And this guy just immediately chimes in like, Chester Ray Arthur, did you know he was a clerk down in this very side? He's like, okay, thank you, buddy.
Yeah, because they find one of the bad guys' dump trucks. McClane takes them out quite quickly and pretends that he's looking for Santa Claus, which I guess was like the one little, like, hey, it's not a Christmas movie, but we'll make one little Christmas reference just for everyone who's...
There was one other one. I can't remember what it was. There was another little Christmas reference later on, and I was like, this is the tiny little things just to get it back there.
So McClane's going down, and this is actually like just because this is not a running thing throughout the movie, but they do one part here where McClane's got the bad guy's radio, and Jeremy Irons, they're out the other end of the aqueduct, and he's like, hey, okay, that one truck we left back, you can come through now because we're out here. We've made sure it's all okay. And McClane's like, sorry, your guy's a bit dead, and blah 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 blah. And but so we get the classic Die Hard talking to the villain over the walkie-talkie.
I love how Jeremy Irons' first thing is like, that dump truck you have has $13 billion. Any chance that we could just call it even?
Let's just make a deal. Take the $13 billion and go do something nice.
Yeah.
So their plan, and this is something that is kind of seeded around here as well, is that what was the name? Targo, who's like sort of the tough looking like other like bad guy.
They called him he's the one who made the bombs. He was a demolitions expert.
But one of the things that's interesting is to kind of set up this idea that he is like actually a devout terrorist, right? He is like adamant that he's doing this for a cause, and he's been saying constantly, just kill him, just kill McClane. And at this point, the guys who got the suitcase bomb off of Samuel L. Jackson are here, and Irons is like, hey, let's use this. Let's blow the dam that's in the aqueduct, and we'll just flood them. And it's like, oh, okay, we'll do that. But what I really like about this is that later on, the scapegoat, and this also kind of calls back to Die Hard 1 a little way, because, Hans Gruber's whole plan was like, hey, we'll make them think we're dead and like the explosion at the top of the building, and therefore they will never come looking for us.
Right.
Similar idea here, except this guy Targo actually thinks they're doing it for real, which is not that they're going to kill them, but that they're going to blow up the money, that they're going to say, hey, we stole your Federal Reserve, this is an anti-America demonstration, and we're going to blow it up. You can watch it from the bridge, from the shore, whatever.
It's literally the end of Fight Club, but in physical gold rather than credit scores or whatever. Like their entire plan is, oh, America, you're too wealthy, too rich. We're setting everybody back to zero by taking all your gold and throwing it to the bottom of the ocean.
But it turns out that Jeremy Irons swapped out the gold for just scrap metal, and it's like, no, we were never going to blow up the money. Are you stupid? No, we're going to take that and go do things with it.
But the third German, the female one, she is like brought into this, and the Targo, the big guy's just like, he's betraying us. He's not with the cause. We need to kill him. And the female one just pulls out a gun, aims it at Targo, and kills him because she's in on it too.
Yes. Well, it turns out she's got the hots for Simon. So
yes.
So
and who can deny him with that haircut he's got going on here?
Oh dear. I mean, it obviously is disgusting to me. The man eats an egg in one scene in this movie. He just
That'll do it.
Takes a whole egg and just shoves it in his mouth.
Right up until that point, I would have let him do anything. But Eating the egg. That's a bit much.
He crossed the line. Okay, yep. He crossed the damn line. So this is a fun sequence. There's a whole bit here where one of the ramps over like a little passage fell down. So McClane's like trying to lift it up, but it's far too heavy. And he looks down the tunnel and just sees all the lights that are on the edges of the tunnel just are going out, but coming towards him. So it's just this darkness. So you can't see what it is. He just sees that there's something knocking out the lights. And he's like, shit, I better get back in the truck. And it's the water, obviously, from the...
Yeah, they don't focus on it too much. There is like one or two shots where they very much show the CGI water wall approaching. And it's not great, but it's suitable enough.
I think they know that, and that's why they're not showing it that much. They're like, yeah, we'll show enough to get the point across, and that's it.
Yeah.
So
we didn't deal with him, but Samuel L. Jackson did go to Yankee Stadium. He found a little like board game looking thing on the seats where he was supposed to go to, but it just says game over on the back. And we see there's a go ahead.
There's a sniper, and it's clearly this was meant to just be where it was going to end. Like this is where he was going to be killed.
Yeah, but because John McClane wasn't there, they are calling in saying like, do we kill? Do we take the shot? Do we do something? And because they don't hear back from Jeremy Irons, he's just like, all right, let him go. Like, this isn't John McClane, so whatever.
Yeah, well, they follow him, which is an important detail because when McClane comes shooting out of the tunnel in the water and Jackson's like, going up the next to this where this tunnel is looking for him, he sees him and immediately McClane's like, hey, were you followed? No, I don't think so. Gunshot start.
Bang, bang.
So we get a car chase. It's pretty decent stuff. It's particularly towards the end when McClane like slides the car around, does like a skid, and like shoots the gun.
I like that they specifically take the time to say like, look, modern cars have features to make sure that this isn't going to happen.
Yes.
We need to rip out the fuse box in order to make sure that that feature is disabled.
Yes, because I need to do something stupid. So keep your head down. It's a fun sequence. It does the job, and I think all the stuff in the aqueduct was fun because it was just a cool, different location. I think the impressive thing about this movie is the sense of variety. Like, okay, it's one thing to say there's a bit in a subway train, there's a bit, obviously we're getting to a boat soon, but even in this aqueduct tunnel, there's a lot of different variety of places for these scenes.
Yeah, I think it's taking full advantage of the idea of, like, again, like we said in Nakatomi Plaza, there is, this section of the tower that is under construction. There's the section of the tower that is like the actual like lobby area. There's the little office area in the back. It does a good job of taking these multiple different areas that feel different, but all having them in a central location to work with. It just so happens that they're doing the same thing here, but with all of New York as the central location.
So they steal the bad guy's car, was their truck, notably with like a tow line on the front, because that's going to come into play in a minute when they basically see the boat that the bad guys are on, and like, shit, we have to get down there from this bridge. And we get this crazy scene where they're going down on this tow line, and then when it runs out and the truck's just pulled off the bridge, they go swinging, which I can only imagine, like, their hands aren't wrapped in anything. They're not wearing gloves, so their hands are just holding onto this cable, and I'm like, your hands would be shredded. Dude,
the moment they started climbing out, I'd be like, you know what? That's not going to work for me. I'm out. I'm done.
Yeah, it's probably, I'm not going to say it's the most far-fetched thing in the movie, but their hands being able to do this and then not getting too injured when everything happens is like the most absurd thing to me out of anything in this.
That's fair. I'm watching back the scene right now, and Zeus does have gloves on. I can't tell if John does. No, John does not. But Zeus does have gloves, so at the very least, he thought ahead.
He's smarter than John. I think we've established that at this point.
What I love the most about this tow cable scene is when the line runs out, it starts pulling the truck over to the edge of the bridge, and you see that there's a guard who has noticed them, and he's about to look up and start shooting. And then as the tow truck comes down, the cable snaps and just clean cuts through the middle of this guy. And it is a bloody mist for like 3 frames as he's just immediately taken off camera.
I really like that little shot, and then the little payoff joke to it is that when they're getting rid of his body and he says, you get the legs, but because he's in 2 halves, they're both on the same side. They're both dragging him.
Right.
So it's just a really funny visual without showing anything too gory, because you never see the actual part that's cut.
They both pick him up as if he's still in pieces, and then they both come around to the same side.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that's fun. They sneak around a bit. I think debatably you could say, what was McClane thinking letting Zeus go off on his own for a second? That's maybe a bit of a ballsy move. And Zeus at this point, of course, has become aware, based on the conversation in the car, that his own nephews are at risk with the school thing. So he kind of takes it upon himself to try and get the code to turn off the bomb.
They basically, right now the plan is they need to find Jeremy Irons. They need to find Simon, and they're running out of time, so they just split up. But he specifically tells Zeus, if you find him, don't be a hero. Come back and get me. Like, he knows that he's not capable of fighting against this guy.
But Zeus tries to threaten him, but he's still got the safety on in the gun. And Irons just grabs the gun casually, says the safety's still on. He takes it off and then shoots him in the leg. Quite devious. This is probably a good time actually to jump over to everything else that's going on, because we've not really talked about the actual search in the schools, and specifically, especially once they figure out the exact school, right? Once they get the whole 21 clue.
Yeah, when the history buff comes back up and says, Chester A. Arthur, did you know?
Because at that point, because I actually really like this as a subplot. And it's not really a subplot in the strictest sense, because it's tying in directly to what's going on with everything else. But like, once we actually have the school, and we have the idea of like, okay, we have to like at the last possible second evacuate it, because if someone is watching, right? If it's not a bluff, if someone is watching and they detonate it, we can maybe have as many kids out of the building as possible before it happens. Like, that's the best we can hope for at a certain point if we have to go that route. So, one of them pretends to be, a fireman and says, hey, we're going to do a fire drill today. And that's when Samuel L. Jackson's nephews are like, that's not a firefighter, that's a cop. He's probably looking for us because of that radio we were carrying at the start of the movie. So they go hiding, which creates whole loads of tension when like they're still in the building a little bit later on.
I also love when they do find the place, they're scanning it top to bottom, trying to find where the bomb is, and they say, hey, the janitor said that this fridge got delivered today, and they show that it's not hooked up in the back, and he's like, yeah, so? And then they show that the light showing the temperature is still on, and it's like, oh crap, this thing's got its own power source, it's definitely our bomb.
Yeah, our bomb guy, Charlie, is like sort of investigating it for the rest of the movie, and he's...
And again, the last time we saw him, he was 100% comedic relief. Like, he was absolutely just like showing like, check how cool this explosion is. And he blows up a chair. Like, he's there as kind of a funny guy. But in this moment, he takes his job extremely seriously. And when we get to the point where they're out of time, the kids are all evacuating, they tell Charlie, get out of there. And then they see the remaining kids in the building. Charlie hears that over the radio, and he's like, I'm not stopping. And he knows he is going to die with this bomb, but he is willing to sit there and try to defuse it for the sake of the remaining kids. Absolute hero move. Love that character.
Yeah, it's a good bit, and it kind of ties back into like everything we talked about in the first movie about McClane taking everything. He'll crack jokes. He's John McClane. He does crack one-liners, but ultimately he's always taking like the actual heroic part very seriously and what his duty is. And it feels like Charlie here is kind of the same thing. And to be fair, they all end up looking good in this, like, because it's it's what's his face, Joe and Colleen Camp's character Connie. Like, when they see those kids still in the building, they both just run back inside. Like, oh, we have to go get them. And like the janitor tosses them the keys, which he doesn't even end up using because there's too many keys. He just kicks the door open. But like, they go and they end up thinking they're going to die on the roof because they thought, oh, maybe like we can jump across to the other building. Maybe that's the best hope we've got now. And it's like, no, it's too far. Shit. Well,
and the entire time they're doing this, they're intercutting with John, who has been fighting against Targo this whole time. He's been fighting against the big guy. And you get this pulse pounding thing of like, he's got to find him with enough time to be able to call over the codes. And like, you see the clock ticking down and you realize John isn't going to make it. Like, as it's intercutting, he does not have the ability to find him. And that's when they do the reveal of, the actual real bomb was on this boat the whole time, and the other bomb was just a fake.
Yeah, it's just syrup, because it basically spurts out of the containers, and Charlie's like, oh, it's syrup. Huh. This was never real. It was all just a ruse. Yeah. Because as he says, like, as I said earlier, I'm the bad guy, but I'm not a monster. So... it's like, yeah, like, you guys are here, now we have to kill you. We have to, tie you up next to this bomb, because this bomb's going to go off. So I think everything up until this point has really worked for me. And I also think the conversation that McClane and Zeus have when they're tied up and kind of, because there's a point here where even, which I love, is that Zeus is able to lockpick McClane out of the handcuffs, but then he drops his little I think it was like a splinter that McClane had in his shoulder.
It was part of the cable, the wire cable when it snapped.
And he actually says to McClane, just go. He's like, just go. Like, you can't save me. Just go. So again, Zeus being a hero, like just proving that he's a good man no matter what.
I forget what scene it was in. I think it was earlier than this, where John basically calls him out for being racist towards white people.
Oh, it's after the jugs because
after the jugs
because Zeus is like, oh, you were about to use a slur on me, and he's like, no, I wasn't. I was going to call you an asshole. And then it kind of all boils up from there.
Yeah, but this kind of feels like the cap to that whole arc, because he's saying like, oh, hey, got to lockpick this out, and he's like, oh, what? Because I'm black? You think that all black people know how to lockpick? He's like, no, I'm questioning if you specifically do. Do you? And he answers like, yeah, okay, I do. I know how to do it. Yeah,
I like their like bond by the end of this movie. I really like, because it's not like, because when they bring up Holly, because then this is where he finally admits that he's like not called Holly back. He was meant to call her. Like, they had a fight a year ago. He's not called her back, and every time it comes up from this point on, Zeus is encouraging him to do it, but also is like, oh, she must be a stubborn bitch to put up with you. Jesus Christ, like.
I like how John's taking it so personally as well. He's just like, hey, look, it's kind of her fault, right? And he's like, no, it isn't. It's all your fault.
Yeah, I like this level of like, John McClane is not this squeaky clean character. He is flawed. He has a temper. He has an attitude problem. Zeus also has flaws. Like he's not just this perfect guy, but he is a good guy. They're both good guys, and that's like ultimately why it's kind of heartwarming when they finally start to care about each other by the end, where John's like, I'm not leaving, I'm not having your death on my conscience, we're solving this.
And then the solution he comes up with to get him out of the handcuffs is he busts open the containers that have the mixed fluids, and he just uses the same thing that Charlie did at the beginning of using a tiny bit to explode the whole thing. Yeah,
which scares the shit out of Zeus. Probably hurts his hands a bit as well, but it frees them and they're able to jump off the boat. So just to recap here, so at the start of this movie, they did that exposition scene where Charlie showed them how this worked. When we saw the two liquids mixing and the little example of how to use a touch of it for a little explosion. That paid off on the train when John saw the little one mixing and threw it out the back of the train. He knew his time was up and he had to do something quickly. We saw it at the school mixing. Turned out to be fake, but it was very intimidating because this was the size of a fridge. It was a huge amount of it. And then it paid off again here, not just because we saw it mixing again, but it took it one step further by having John do what Charlie did at the start and used a little teensy amount of it to do a little explosion to help. So there was so much payoff to everything they set up in that.
And then on top of that, if you ignore the thing with the handcuffs, which is just a good way to bring it back up, it's been escalating each time. So the first time we see the tiny little explosion that's enough to lift the chair. The second time we see, about a suitcase size, whatever you want to call that, it is enough to derail an entire train and blow out the whole bottom of that station. And then this one, which is the size of a fridge, is practically a nuclear explosion out on the middle of this boat.
It's huge, yeah. The HDR for this explosion was quite bright. It looked like a nuke going off on this on the water. It was quite something.
Yeah, but this is where we get like our false ending, because they get back to the shore and they're like, he won. We have no idea where he went to. He managed to escape. They took all the gold with them. Like, that was not anything. There's nothing at the bottom of the sea.
And it was never going to be the ending. It's not a type of movie to have a downer ending. But it was interesting to see John be kind of bummed. Oh, hey, he got away. Shit. Like, the bad guy got away. This really sucks. And Zeus is like, hey, we're still alive. You can go call your wife. Go do it. Joe, give him some money. And Joe's like, yeah, here's a quarter. Go and use the phone. And obviously the big kind of like dun 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 is that John basically realizes where he is, because right before Irons left them, John's like, hey, can I have a final request? I've been needing an aspirin all day. My head is banging. And because he has been popping aspirin all day, Jeremy Irons is like, yeah, it's your lucky day. Keep the bottle. And it just so happens on the top of the aspirin bottle, it says where it came from, what pharmacy it came from, and it's a specific place in Canada, where so they know where to go now. So they bust into the celebration of the villains, which is lots of champagne. We're going to buy a country. Jeremy Irons goes to have angry sex with the evil lady, and that's when McClane shows up with the helicopter. Now, admittedly, one of the things that I've heard people complain about a lot with this, bar from any other complaints you might have, is why the hell would Zeus come here on the helicopter with them? And yeah, that is far-fetched. In no world would they bring this civilian for this.
His story is done. We don't need that anymore.
Yes.
But yeah.
But of course, they want him there so he can have a final couple of moments with McClane or whatever. So is that. Ultimately, though, I find this a little bit lackluster as an action scene, because it's ultimately just, okay, Irons gets into his own helicopter, shoots a bunch at them, but the other helicopter, McClane runs away from it to sort of keep the focus on him so that he's the only one that's a target, and he's only got one little tiny handgun, a little revolver with 2 bullets, and it's like, okay, what do I shoot with 2 bullets? That's all I've got. What can I possibly do? And it's really just running around a little bit, the searchlight, until ultimately McClane, right as Jeremy Irons has got him in his sights, he smiles because he's about to win. McClane notices that he's right under the power cables, and he shoots down the power cables, and it makes the chopper go boom, and that's your big climax. And McClane says, after this, yippee-ki-yay, mother effer.
Yeah. The one-liner that he uses is like, have fun meeting your brother or something like that. Like something about bringing up Hans.
Yeah. I did like the bit on the boat, actually, when they were interacting for a touch, where McClane just sort of hits out with, your brother was an asshole. And
that felt so improv to me. That felt like McClane just kind of threw that, or Willis just kind of threw that out there, because you see Jeremy Irons just kind of roll with it, where his face drops because he's like, how dare you? But then he realizes, oh, I got him right where I want him anyway. So he just plays along. He's just like, yeah, but shut up.
Well, I almost think it's like McClane trying to rile him up, and Irons being like, no, I'm not going to fall for that. I'm just going to play along. Yeah, he was an asshole, and laugh it off, because you want me to get angry and make a mistake, and that's how John beat, Gruber in the first movie. I mean, I don't know if I'd say that he forced him to make a mistake by having him give him the aspirin bottle, because McClane didn't know he had one. Like, that was just a complete coincidence.
No, I mean, it wasn't even him trying to outthink him.
No.
Like, it was literally just, can I have some aspirin? Like, either he was being coy with it, where he didn't expect to get an answer, or he genuinely wanted an aspirin.
Yeah.
Like, there's no in between there.
Yeah, that's really all it was. But, so, that goes boom, and McClane, because he tried to call Holly when he had this realization before, and because the light bulb went off, he just ran off to go and deal with it. And Holly, you can hear her on the phone go, hello? Hello? Hello?
She says hello, and then, damn it, John. Like, she knows it's him.
So the movie ends with him going over the payphone that's there. And I did think, like, how cool are Canada as far as, like, oh yes, American police, just come in and arrest some, like, have a big fight on our soil. Like, how easy going are they with that? I'm
willing to bet that this is much less the police and much more the FBI, who we already know is involved in this. And they were like, look, we're going to pull some Interpol stuff right now. Whatever treaties we got going on, you're going to let us in so we can do this. Yeah, I was thinking that because technically this is very much out of McClane's jurisdiction. Yes. Look, everything McClane has ever done has been out of his jurisdiction. Like, when he was in LA, he was an NY cop. When he was in, I'm blanking on the location of the second one.
Washington,
that's right. He was an LA cop. Now that he's in New York, he's finally in his jurisdiction, and then they go to Canada just to pull him out of it.
Yeah, the ending does feel a little tacked on, but to be honest, I don't really even mind the location change so much, just because it is a little bit different. Is that, the villain kind of got away, but then they were able to figure out how to follow them. Yes. That's at least a little bit different. I just think it could have been more. It could have been like, more of like a longer chase to a different location where there's more of an actual, like, confrontation, something with a bit more panache to it, a little bit more stages to it. So let me give you some more panache. It doesn't have more stages to it, but
There was an alternative ending filmed for this movie.
Go on.
It was the original scripted one from writer Jonathan Hensley. It was back when not Simon Says, but it was the first thing that was submitted once it was Die Hard.
Yeah.
So the alternative ending is some time has passed. It was not immediately afterwards. It was some time. McClane was used as the scapegoat for everything that happened, so he's been fired from the NYPD. The FBI took away his pension, and also he's been divorced from Holly. He has lost literally everything in his life. However, he does manage to do the aspirin thing. He manages to track it down, not to Canada, but to a place in Hungary. They actually managed to get the gold bars all the way to Hungary. When they get to Simon, he's double-crossed most of his accomplices. He is now pretty much working alone. And they have turned the gold bars into tiny little Empire State Building like figurines in order to smuggle them out. McClane shows up, and he invites him to play a game of McClane Says, which eventually ends up turning into a game of Russian roulette with a rocket launcher. So you know how the rocket launcher has like the two sides to it?
Yeah.
The idea is that he got rid of like the defining features that would show which side it's going to fire out of, and then they basically have to spin the rocket launcher.
Okay, look, I'm just going to cut in here. 90% of this is garbage, and they were right to not use it.
So they end up firing off the rocket launcher. It ends up killing Simon. He ends up getting it wrong, so he ends up dying. And then that's it. He's gotten his revenge against Simon.
They were right 100% to not use almost all of that. McClane doing a little bit of McClane Says at the end. I like the idea of that in some form, but not with this weird rocket launcher Russian roulette.
So the reason they said that they cut it, the studio wise, is that they didn't like the idea that McClane like lost everything. They didn't want to be that cruel to him, but at the same time, they felt that this level of revenge and like going after Simon like that was too much.
Yeah, they're right. Like, it feels too like, I don't know. It doesn't feel like a Die Hard. It feels like a spiteful like thriller ending or something. I don't know. That does not work at all. They were totally right to not do that. Also, the idea that it's a bottle of aspirin from Hungary is a lot more far-fetched, because it made sense to me in this movie that, they've had their base in Canada relatively close by to where New York is, right? A few hours away. And that's been their base. They've come in for their plan, and they're back to their base. That made sense to me that he'd bought aspirin locally to where they're currently staying. Like, I'm not saying you can't buy a bottle of aspirin in Hungary and have it be on you the entire way across the Atlantic and then so on and so on, but given how often he was popping those aspirin throughout the day, it kind of feels like he's going through these bottles a bit quicker than that.
Yeah, I would assume he would have multiple bottles on him, but fair enough.
It stretches the realm of believability a little bit to me. But yeah, I mean, I don't love the ending they have. It's just a bit lackluster from an action point of view. I wish it felt like more of a climax, but it doesn't diminish things too much, just purely because ultimately Die Hard's not a movie, or typically anyway, Die Hard isn't the type of movie where it's like, oh, the ending's so important to the entire thing working, right? It's not like an intense drama where you get to the end and the character changes what makes the whole thing click together. A lot of what makes Die Hard is McClane problem solving and trying to do, think against the villain, outsmart them, save people throughout the whole thing. So the ending being a bit of a weak point is a shame, but it doesn't kind of like instantly make the whole movie not work as a result. The movie mostly still actually works quite well.
Yeah. No, I think as much as I was saying that it turned in the second half, like once Simon Says stopped and Die Hard began, I didn't dislike the turn there. I think that it is a different tone to it, from the riddle solving to the run and gunning that it was. But ultimately, that's what Die Hard has always been, is this idea of you just are trying to figure things out and survive along the way. You're just trying to do the best you can in a crappy situation.
Yeah.
I think that ultimately that's where the ending gets a little bit soured, though, is because the situation ended. Like, everything was wrapped up. The guy escaped. No longer does John McClane have to be involved in this anymore. He comes back to it just purely out of, I'm the guy who figured it out. And of course, it's going to end with him doing his own thing as well.
Yeah, I think maybe what they should have done is more, instead of like figuring out where he's going, somehow like just have someone like, we've heard over the police radio they've spotted like the trucks or the boats or whatever that they're using, and just have them chase them down right there. Like the idea that they're not at the border yet, like, oh, they're still on the US side of the border, whether it's on the water or on land, regardless. It's like, oh, we can still get to them from here.
You got to set up something a little bit earlier that is like something that John sets up, something that he specifically is able to do in order to pay off later on and say, oh, there's a way that we can still track them.
Or even just because they say that they swapped out the gold with the scrap metal at the docks before they got on the boat. What if it's just as simple as, oh, they have to go back to the docks to get their gold, so we'll go get them there. Like, they'll be doing that right now. Yeah,
that would work, because it would be this idea that he shouldn't have been alive to know that detail of the plan. Nobody should know that detail of their plan.
Yeah.
But because he survived, it gives him just that little bit of an edge.
Yeah, and they could have had their confrontation there, and it would have felt a bit more, connected to everything else. And
it would also take advantage of the fact that the one thing that they can't give up on is their greed for this situation as well. Like, if they were just terrorists, they'd be able to get past it, but it is about the greed.
Yeah, it's like you say, Die Hard's all about a crisis that's ongoing, and it kind of finished, and then they sort of tacked on something afterwards, and that's very not Die Hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. All right, well, I think we're ready to kind of wrap this up. So, what was your scene of the movie?
Scene of the movie. I think for me personally, I think it's probably going to be something in the school, just because I think that that's where I was like I said, I forgot about the earlier sequence where it was explicitly said that the school thing was just a bait, and I was actually like really engaged with that stuff as it was happening. I think the editing during that sequence back to John,
I think it's really well done.
Yeah, just panic trying to figure it out. So I think the moment I'm going to give it to is the moment where Charlie is packing up and ready to get out of the building, and he hears that there's kids in there, and he just looks back at the bomb and it's just like, I'm staying. I gotta at least try this. I think that that's, for a character that's not John McClane, to have such a powerful, just emotional moment of like, I gotta do this. I think that's really a testament to how well they got the stakes of this scene established.
Honestly, there's a bunch of things I could pick. I think I want to go with the taxi ride.
Okay.
If I'm forced to pick. And I'll point out one thing we didn't mention earlier on, which is at one point, Zeus says, "Are you trying to hit these people?" And he says, "No." Well, maybe that mime.
I thought that's where you were going with the video game bit, where you get like bonus points if you hit a mime or something.
No, they should have done that, but they did not. All right, MVP of the movie.
Normally I would probably actually give it to that Charlie guy that I was talking about before, but I don't think that he does enough in the movie to really earn it. And I did give him best scene, so I'm just going to let that be his little gold star here. What I think it comes down to is Samuel L. Jackson or Jeremy Irons. And that's not because they are the biggest names in this, but I do think that they bring different things to this movie, and yet they are both extremely interesting in the way that they portray them. I think for this...
I was going to say, I think there's more layers to both of them than maybe initially meets the eye when you stop and think about some of the decisions they make. And I think even just through talking about it, I don't think I've ever thought about how much depth there actually is to Samuel L. Jackson's character, because he goes from being very kind of one note, just like, oh, I hate white people, blah, 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 blah. And there's actually a lot of layers there once he starts being in these situations where he's been forced to make choices, which is good. I think Irons has a bit of depth as well with some of his choices, but if I'm jumping in, I'll say I'm picking Jackson first.
Yeah. I mean, that's the same. I was going to go with Jackson. I think if you told me before the review to pick, I may have gone Irons, but in talking about it and really exploring the depths that his character like changes over the course of it, I think there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. I think that people have given credit for this role. He's got a lot to him.
It's wild as well, because it's like the only, well, it's not the only one, but it's like just interesting that this one, like McClane has a partner, like almost an equally billed star to play off of, and it's actually done very well and doesn't feel out of place. Yeah.
It feels like the kind of movie we might have had if Die Hard 2 was set in LA and he was actually able to partner up with Reginald VelJohnson's character.
Yeah. All right, what are you rating Die Hard with a Vengeance?
I do like this one. I think it's very well done. It really comes down to how much does the ending kind of bring it down for me. And I think that in a movie where that's, just over 2 hours long, I'm going to give it more credit. I don't think the ending is that impactful, all things considered. Like you said, the ending is not what defines a Die Hard movie. It's, it's back to like Saw movies and stuff like that. Those movies lived and died by their endings. This one is, all of the action leading up to it is a lot more important. So all in all, I'm probably going to say that this one is, I'll give it an 8.5. I think it is in that territory. It's very good. I was bouncing between an 8 and an 8.5, but I do think it squeaks up to the 8.5 for me.
Interesting, because I'm going straight 8, which is kind of where I've always more or less landed this one. I think it's a great movie. I think it's a great sequel to Die Hard. It feels like it puts McClane in a very different type of situation. The gimmick that it has, which is the Simon Says, the whole city, the school bomb and all that, all work really well as a very different type of situation for McClane to be in. So I like a lot of the side characters. I like the other colleagues that he has, and they all get to kind of look good throughout this. So, yeah, it's full of memorable moments, especially the first half or so. So, there you go. That is our review of Die Hard with a Vengeance, which means next time you'll be here for Live Free or Die Hard, or as it was released in the UK as Die Hard 4.0.
Oh God, they went technologic with it.
Well, I think that was the original title in the US as well when they were making it, and then at some point it became Live Free or Die Hard, but it kept the 4.0 title. And I think that's because the whole whatever expression this Live Free or is not that's an American thing. No one in the UK understood that.
That was Patrick Henry. That was Live Free or Die, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Just jumping in real quick before we stray too far into the next week's stuff. Makes the cut.
Oh yeah, I'd say it makes the cut. Yeah,
makes the cut. Yeah, not cut above, just makes the cut.
Just makes the cut. Yeah.
All right, works for me.
I think that's fair for this. So yeah, I have not seen Die Hard 4 since the theater in 2007. So right. I'm actually kind of excited to watch it again, for better or worse, to see if it holds up or not, or if I feel better about it, worse about it. I actually don't know how I'm going to feel. This is a genuine curiosity. It's not like 5. 5 I'm dreading going into because I know I'm going to hate it. Yeah. But 4, I actually don't know how I'm going to feel about it now.
Justin Long and Timothy Oliphant. That's not saying great things to me. But
Mary Elizabeth Winstead?
But Kevin Smith.
Well, I'm less enthusiastic.
Yeah, we're trading that off. I will say, I don't know about your recording schedule with Tim, which is going to happen first, but I think this will probably be the first film I watch of the new year in terms of the show. So,
oh, right, yeah.
We'll see if that rings it in well or not.
I don't know. We'll find out. Maybe it's a New Year's treat. Obviously, for you guys watching, it'll be a couple of weeks later before you get that review. That'll
be January 4th. It's right afterwards. I'm saying it's the first review of the new year.
Oh, okay.
We'll do it before the end of the year.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah. All right. Well, that's the show, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. You can, of course, support the content and get bonus shows over on Patreon. Patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Me and David do 2 monthly shows that you can get on there. One is the Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection. So your arty films, your foreign films, your prestigious types of movies. And then Extra Reels, where we review the absolute worst things ever made. And sometimes they're so bad they're good, but often they're not. Often they are torture, they are pain. Such as Hot Frosty, which was December's episode. They're not always new movies. In fact, they're rarely new movies, but that was an exception for Christmas time. So, yes, go check out
stop
that.
Making exceptions? I don't like when we make exceptions.
Go check out that stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do. Of course, like, subscribe, share us out, blah, blah, blah. All the usual things. It's been a pleasure. I will see you guys next time. Keep watching movies. And if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.